Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural Permian Basin Energy Webinar 2025. I'm Kim Bellotto, President and CEO of Energy Network Media Group, better known as Shell Magazine, and the host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The Energy Mix. And I'm honored to serve as the Master of Ceremonies today. And we are thrilled to bring together leaders from across Texas, New Mexico, and the nation to discuss where the Permian Basin is headed in innovation, workforce, economic growth, and community resilience. So thank you for joining us. To officially open today's program, I'd like to welcome Jose L. Perez, who is the President and CEO of Hispanics in Energy, the organization that is proudly hosting today's event. Jose, welcome.
Thank you. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this important Hispanics in Energy Permian Basin webinar. I appreciate the time each of you has taken, industry leaders, public officials, educators, researchers, and community partners, to focus on one of the most strategically significant energy regions in the United States. For the last century, the Permian Basin has powered America. Over just the past 25 years, this region alone has generated an estimated 300 to 700 billion dollars in net industry profit and now produces more than 46% of the nation's crude oil. That scale of value creation places the Permian Basin among the most productive energy regions in the world, past or present. And the basin's output continues to grow, supplying not only oil and natural gas, but now anchoring emerging opportunities in hydrogen, carbon management, data center development, and advanced energy infrastructure. But today's conversation is not only about the barrels and production curves, it's about people, and specifically the Hispanic community, which forms the backbone of the Permian workforce and surrounding counties. In many communities throughout West Texas and Southeast New Mexico, Hispanics make up 45 to 65% of the population. They are central to the region's schools, its labor force, its small business, and its civic life. Yet the data also reveal major challenges. Hispanic students across the region still face persistent K-12 education gaps, limited access to advanced STEM coursework, underrepresentation in engineering and technical degree pathways. In the workforce, Hispanics are strongly present in field operations, trucking, construction, craft trades, but still markedly underrepresented in engineering, IT, geoscience, and corporate leadership roles that guide the future of energy. We also see gaps in political representation, even in majority Hispanic communities. The number of Hispanic elected officials, county commissioners, school board members, mayors, and district trustees falls far below population levels. These disparities influence everything from workforce training and infrastructure investment to environmental planning and economic diversification. So today's webinar has a clear purpose: to bring data, leadership, and intention together to understand the Permian Basin, to understand how the Permian Basin can continue to be the nation's premier energy engine while also becoming a national model for inclusive workforce development, Hispanic business participation, and stronger community advancement. HIE's goal is simple: Hispanics in Energy, to ensure that as the Permian Basin grows, Hispanic workers, students, entrepreneurs, and families grow with it, fully participating, fully benefiting, and fully contributing to America's energy future. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to a productive discussion. Let's begin.
Well, thank you, Jose. What a wonderful speech. To set the stage for the rest of today's conversation, we'll begin with a brief video segment featuring remarks from Mike Wirth, the CEO of Chevron, that recently aired on Fox News. Can we play the video?
The Permian Basin will be producing for decades to come as we continue to innovate and find ways to improve recovery.
So the Permian Basin is that important. It's critical to economic security in America, and that means national security, doesn't it?
I think we've seen in many places in the world, especially recently, whether you're talking gas in Europe or critical minerals with China, energy security and national security are linked. The U.S. is blessed with an abundance of natural resources, and we now have an administration that wants to see the energy industry invest in those resources to make sure that America's energy strength translates into economic strength and competitiveness, and importantly, security.
So let me ask you about that. I want to get back to sort of the specifics of hydraulic fracking and how it's done. But let's talk about whether or not it is a new day for the oil industry and for Chevron, given the backdrop of policy. Do you believe things feel different with a new administration in place?
Oh, 100%. We've gone from an administration that openly declared its intent to try to reduce and eliminate our industry over time. And we now have an administration that sees American energy strength, American energy dominance, as linked to economic competitiveness. We've seen a policy shift. We've seen senior cabinet officials that actually understand energy. And look, this administration wants to protect the environment as well, but it wants to use the resources of our country to support our economy and our security. And we've seen that in policies across the board.
So what kind of policies can you name that actually have changed the game for Chevron and for the oil industry? I mean, you're talking about policies that are debated in Washington, and yet you're feeling it here in Midland, Permian Basin, Texas.
We're seeing red tape eliminated from the permitting process. We've seen executive orders that streamline the process of getting from an application through to a permit. We've seen a reversal of policies that stopped lease sales in the deepwater Gulf of America, and we've now resumed lease sales in an area that's got tremendous potential, and we are going to have access to explore for resource there. So if you look at any aspect of policy related to energy, we are seeing movements in a positive direction. The thing that would be really most important now is to see those codified in legislation that ensures that they're durable. We've got a long-term plan that we have continued to follow, and what I would say is it allows us to do our work faster, allows us to do our work more efficiently, with less red tape, with more confidence and more certainty. We're investing 2/3 of our global capital spending, which is between $15 and $20 billion this year, is right here in the United States. If you go back a decade or more ago, it was reversed. Most of the spending was going outside of this country.
Well, very interesting. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our opening speaker, the Honorable Cesar J. Blanco, Texas State Senator for District 29. Senator Blanco is a leading voice on energy, economic development, and cross-border collaboration, and a strong advocate for the communities of West Texas and the Permian Basin. Senator Blanco, thank you for joining us today.
So great to be here with everyone. Kim, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and it's great to see so many friends on this. I want to thank, first of all, Hispanics in Energy President and CEO, my friend Jose Perez. We were in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago for the NALEO, one of our policy summits, and it was great to see you there. And thanks for all you do for Hispanics in Energy and inviting me today to talk a little bit about the work that you all do as an organization to bring Latinos in every layer of the energy sector. We're talking from the blue collar all the way to the C-suite. And through your leadership, and I've had these conversations with you in the past, you all are expanding representation, and you all are strengthening the workforce pipeline for an industry that essentially powers this state, but not just this state. It powers the country, and it's also powering the global economy, and that's the mission. That mission is creating real opportunities. It's creating real opportunities for our communities. especially those in the areas that I represent across West Texas. So I want to thank you all so much for the work that you do day in and day out. You all do a phenomenal job. Look, we all know that Texas is it's the energy capital of the world. But more importantly, we know that the Permian Basin is the beating heart of that energy. And our region spans more than 75,000 square miles, which includes more than 7,000 fields. When you look at its production, we produce over 5.8 million barrels of oil per day, which is about 42% of the total US crude supply. And that level of production really is the foundation of America's geopolitical leverage. I'm a veteran. I served in the military, and that aspect is a very important aspect for me. What it does is it allows American manufacturing. It helps transportation, and it also modernizes to help us move forward with confidence in this global economy. And this growth, as we saw earlier in the clip, it's expected to continue as long as we maintain, excuse me, a workforce, as long as we maintain the infrastructure and also the policy environment that's going to make it possible. Natural gas also tells us the same story. The Permian produces more than 21 billion cubic feet per day, with major pipelines and the build outs underway to meet export capacity for the needs of a variety of things, such as things that we're seeing in West Texas, such as data centers, industrial facilities, and then also families that are simply trying to keep their lights on at a time when things are so expensive. When you look at our region, it holds an estimated 29 billion barrels of recoverable oil and about 8.4 billion barrels of natural gas liquids. So these reserves represent decades of future production if we're able to manage the infrastructure wisely, if we're able to invest in innovation and making sure that we're able to support the people that are actually doing this work. So when you look at the impact from an economic standpoint, it's enormous. And in Texas, the oil and gas industry generates over $27 billion in state and local tax revenue. These are the royalties, right? And royalties. So those dollars are so important for us in the legislature because it funds critical things such as public schools. It helps supports our teachers. It strengthens our rural counties. It helps build roads and water systems that keep commerce moving and trade moving. So for many communities, these funds are their strongest economic backbone. When you look at some of the counties that I represent in the Permian Basin, you could see how important industry is. So, I wanted to set the table with that because that's important. But I'm here to talk a little bit about the focus on the people behind all those important numbers, because those numbers don't exist without the people. And resource extraction industries in our part of the world, in the Permian Basin, support nearly 41,000 direct jobs in oil and gas specifically, and then about a little over 18,000 additional jobs that are tied to things like construction and the building of the infrastructure of the industry that supports the industry. And when you think about it, these are men and women waking up every day before the sun rises. These are men and women that are spending weeks away from their families in remote locations. They are folks that are operating heavy equipment. They're people that are navigating, drilling innovations. And they're the people that are keeping systems online through, brutal heat. If you've ever been to West Texas, or the Permian Basin during the summertime, it is intense. We have these sandstorms that blow through our region that are not fun, and we've got long stretches of road out there that we travel. So it's not easy work. When you look at the population in the Permian Basin, over half of that population is Hispanic, and nearly 50% of the oil and gas workforce in that region is Hispanic. So 50%, I mean, that is a powerful example of what representation is. It's structural. And it's not just symbolic. It's structural. It's the engine of the industry. Latinos are the engine. Yet the communities that carry this economic load are also strained. When you look at the public schools, they're overcrowded. When you look at housing costs, they're skyrocketing, they're limited. And when you look at 2016, nearly 40% of homes in the region cost under $200,000. By 2023, that number dropped to just 13%. So families move there. They move there because of opportunity. They move there to build a better life. And many of them do, but the pressure on housing, the pressures of childcare, the pressures of healthcare and transportation means that success often comes with instability. So an industry, this profitable should not generate statewide prosperity at the expense of the very workers who make that prosperity possible. And the path forward, it's not to slow down production. I think that the solution is to modernize our infrastructure. I think the solution is to invest in our local communities and to keep that engine running. When people hear the word infrastructure, they think of pipelines and transmission lines, right? For this industry, and those matter. That's important, but so do schools, and so does broadband. And so do hospitals and housing. And if the Permian Basin is the engine that powers the United States, we should definitely treat its cities, its counties as essential infrastructure, not just as boom towns or afterthoughts, right? And a stable regulatory environment matters because the industry can plan around consistent rules. What it cannot plan around are housing shortages, doctor shortages, or roads that can't handle workforce traffic. When a region supports the scale of production seen in the Permian Basin, its local infrastructure becomes a core part of that national energy reliability. For these reasons, I filed a couple of bills last session. One of them was Senate Bill 1001, which is the Texas Strong Act. This is a bipartisan legislation. I filed this with my Republican colleague, Brooks Landgraf. Which is designed to ensure that a portion of the state's oil and gas tax revenue is reinvested directly into the communities where that production happens. And we can do so by strengthening our infrastructure, supporting essential public services, and then fueling sustainable local development. And while that bill didn't pass, we're going to still take another shot at it, and we remain committed to advancing those type of policies because prosperity of our state should also uplift the communities that generate that prosperity. Companies invest where workers can live, families can thrive, and where communities can responsibly sustain long-term growth. So that's important. We also must move past the idea that environmental stewardship conflicts with energy development. We can absolutely drill. We can definitely refine. We can transport. We can innovate responsibly while also reducing emissions and improving efficiency. And markets reward efficiency. Global competitiveness demands adaptation. And Texas is going to continue to lead, not by resisting modernizations, but by shaping it. Workforce, it's also critically important. It's the foundation of every refinery project, every engineering conference, and every corporate strategy discussion has a workforce element. But the reality is that the energy workforce is aging. The demand curve is getting steeper, and the population most capable of filling the gap is the Latino population. But you know, we can't simply say just come and work in the industry. We need to be able to have career technical pathways in our high schools and our community colleges. We need to be able to set up apprenticeships and industry recognized certifications and partnerships with our universities. We need to have a mentorship pipeline that takes first generation students all the way to geophysicists, to executives, to the engineers and the policymakers. You know, when we invest in the Hispanic workforce, we're strengthening the labor pool that already powers the industry, and we elevate the people who are already on those rigs. We elevate the people that are driving those trucks. We elevate the people that are testing in those labs and in the corporate centers, right? We tap into the community that keeps the Permian Basin operating at full speed. And I think if we do that, we're going to get quality workers and a quality workforce. As a Senate of the Committee on Business and Commerce, I hear the same priorities from industry again and again. Industry wants predictability. Industry wants a skilled workforce. They want infrastructure that supports the growth, and they want the ability and the room to innovate. And Texas energy sector is it's not a finished product. It's a living system, one that we must continually and continuously evolve. And we can do that. We can do that with operators. We can do that with engineers. We can do it with companies. We could do it with unions and regulators and communities all at the table working together. So that's important. So to the leaders tuning in, whether you're from the utility sector or the PUC or oil and gas and renewables or technology, I want to thank all of you for the work that you do to keep our families, to keep our businesses and our economy running, and for helping Texas remain an energy leader in the world. So I want to thank you for this opportunity. To Hispanics and Energy, thank you once again for building that bridge between ambition and opportunity. You all do a phenomenal job. And I also want to thank you for embracing the fact that any future in energy must include the people who are already defining it. And those are Latinos. So it's been great being here with you all today. I hope that everyone enjoys today's conversations. I've seen the list of speakers, very impressive, very great lineup, and I hope you all enjoy. And thank you all so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Senator Blanco. What a wonderful speech, and you're doing a great job. Now we're going to move into our first session, Driving Growth. And this conversation will explore how businesses can position themselves to capture the opportunity shaping America's energy heartland, from emerging technologies to economic development and long-term competitiveness. Our moderator for this session is Jose Nino, the chairman of BioFriendly and a board member for the Hispanics in Energy. And joining him is our distinguished panel, Albert C. Pantana, President and CEO of United States Mexico Chamber of Commerce, Alonso Aragenade, which I know I've kind of butchered that, Chairman and CEO of Aragenade Oil Company, better known as ARG Petro, Alaman Verde, who is a mineral legal right expert attorney and Hispanic and Energy board member, and Savannah Morales, CEO of Midland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I would like to give an opportunity for Alonso to give us his proper pronunciation of his last name before I turn it over to Jose.
Sure, thank you, Kim. It's Alfonso Ardindegui.
Identity. Thank you so much.
And that's why we kind of helped with the ARG Petro to help shorten that a little bit. But yeah, it's Argindigi.
Thank you very much. Jose, it's all yours.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. As we come online here, there you are. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you for everybody listening out there that have come to join Hispanics in Energy on this tremendous issue and this forum on the Permian Basin out of Texas. We at BioFriendly, we're an environmental and energy company. We are based out of Texas. We manufacture just northeast of Dallas in Anna, Texas. We have our laboratories there, our manufacturing facilities there, and from there we distribute all over Texas, and we distribute out to about a dozen countries around the world. We have fuel additives that we put into diesel fuel, and it lowers the emissions on those trucking companies or those trucks, tractors, and so on. And we're also big now into the agriculture area with the tractors and generators there. We also have done, oh God, over 2 billion gallons. We've treated over 2 billion gallons of fuel, and we've also treated over another, support north of 5 billion gallons at sea on ships. So we're doing pretty good, and we're looking to expand in Texas to put more product out there. And there is a law in Texas called the Tex-Led law, lower the emissions on diesel law, that helps us and helps our industry to get out there and be able to work with everyone. Now in Texas, as we know, the Permian Basin, thank you very much, Senator. You put it really well as to what's going on. We had a conversation a couple of days ago in Washington, here in Washington, on the Permian Basin and also everything that's around it. As you know, when you're drilling and when you're moving on the economy that's in the Permian Basin, it's taking everything in. You'd be surprised how many other secretariats are at work out there, from agriculture to food, with food, healthcare, commerce, transportation, energy, interior, and many more, because it's such a huge infrastructure beyond just the upstream and of that program. But today we have four people that will be joining us, and I welcome them, and I'm going to be starting here to ask some questions of them. And I'm going to be starting with, if it's okay with you, General Zapanta, I will start with you. Where do you see the greatest potential of public-private partnerships to accelerate economic growth in the region?
Yeah, thank you, Jose. It's good to see you again. I'm trying to get used to your bow tie.
Gracias.
Focusing on the two items that I really felt that I'd like to give some input. One is the public-private partnerships that are available, and the other is how do small and medium-sized Hispanic firms get into the play? Because if you notice, it was great to hear from the Chevron CEO, but I didn't see any brown people around him either. They may have been on the rig, but at the end of the day, the big boys were not playing in that field. The closest that we got was back 15 years ago when and this is where the public-private partnership really comes in play, that DFW Airport was an extension of the Barnett Shale and some of the fracking that was developed by Pioneer in Midland. And of course, they're a Irving company that was just purchased about a year and a half ago from Exxon. The whole point being that unless we can get our companies, potential Hispanic-owned companies, into the ownership or part of these major developments. Example, we ended up with 12% of a $2 to $4 billion development of the Barnett Shale under the DFW Airport with Chesapeake. Why? Because that public entity basically said,
we wanted to have up to 20% of women-owned and minority-owned companies. And so part of that was to be able to then bring in companies that could actually be from our community, but also raise the kind of money, which we did 125 million and drilled 114 wells with Chesapeake. And I'm giving you that as an example that that's kind of the unknown opportunity that we have sitting out there. And that can be with the federal government, it can be regional governments. And you heard Cesar talk about what the state is talking about. But, you know, at the end of the day, that's how do we play in the game where we're actually on the field, not in the field. And so I really want to focus that we have opportunities with these public and private partnerships. The big companies have a way to not, I think, have us participate in some of these activities. I will also say what's really interesting, Permian's a good place because what may or may not be known, a good half of their development has already been used and taken out of the ground. And so they're having to go in to do what's called enhanced oil recovery, and that's CO2. And in fact, at ARCO, during my tenure, we were actually bringing in CO2 out of Sheep Mountain and southern Colorado, all the way to Midland, so that they could do the enhanced oil recovery. So my focus is how do we help our small and medium-sized Hispanic-owned businesses get in the game? These major companies, or even some of the mid-sized companies that are not the big five, used to be big five, now they're big three, that then they have opportunities to bring us in. I don't like to just hear we're 50% of the workforce. We need to be 5–10% of the ownership. And how you do that is you then got to get with some of the other companies that are already in the game. And if it's a public-private entity, then usually the public side has to say, you got to have participation from women and minority-owned companies. Now, that may change in this administration. We'll find out. But the big boys are the ones that really control it. And until we can get in that game, Jose, you know, we're on the sidelines looking in. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Alfonso, could you add to it the same on the public-private partnerships to accelerate the economic growth of the region?
Sure, Jose, thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone that is participating in today's event. I really think that, you know, more exposure out there, the more louder we are into the market, I think it brings attention, and that's exactly what we need as Hispanics. You know, certainly we're a four-generation family-run business. I am the third generation, and we're going on 83 years. Have you know, our primary core businesses in the field distribution. We are the distribution arm for major refiners. Certainly, when it comes a lot to diesel and lubricants and other forms of chemicals. And so, you know, we're out there in the field every day and working, and much like the senator mentioned, you know, it's the boots on the ground that are making things happening. And so, you know, teams, field teams certainly that are directly involved in expanding pipeline connectivity, you know, upgrading storage facilities and improving, you know, that port to rail. You know, Corpus Christi, the Gulf, is very important to the Permian, and that connectivity is I think there's still a lot of work to be done. But you know, these projects, you know, certainly require a lot of close coordination with the public agencies, and you know, certainly in permitting, safety inspections, and community engagement. You know, we talk a lot about workforce training, and that is cannot overemphasize the importance of that workforce training. You know, the partnerships, certainly with you know, local colleges and trade schools, are not to be just you know theoretical. You know, they result in field internships, apprenticeships, job placement. And field supervisors often mentor these students, providing that real world experience and helping shape the how we match our workforce with what the industry needs. And so the workforce training is so important. Community investment is also something that our family has done as long as I can remember, and you come back to the workforce, we've established endowments, gifting, scholarships to these kids, specifically placing them in the space that directly affects us. But community investment in the field operations support the community growth, and by participating in local housing initiatives, road improvements, and essential services. For example, companies may sponsor safety workshops, contribute to local emergency response teams, and invest in infrastructure that benefits both business and residents. So, that's pretty much my perspective on how the public and private can work together hand in hand.
Well, thank you very much, Alonso. Uh, it is important for education and training in the vocational areas also, so they can support all this. Now, remember that this program, as our president's CEO talks about, that it's going to be going over $7 trillion over a certain period of time, but that's going to bring a lot of economic opportunity in different areas all over the state of Texas, adjoining New Mexico, and the other states around it. And even the country of Mexico will be affected, but it affects the whole country. So that's a good start. Now, let me go to Savannah, please. Savannah, you're in the middle of it down there, being in Midland. What strategies can local and regional businesses adapt to remain competitive as the energy market evolves? So please speak to that.
Yeah, so here in the Permian Basin, we talk about energy a lot. We talk about how the entire picture of the oil and gas, power infrastructure, renewable workforce, community stability here in the local and Hispanic-owned businesses. So to stay competitive means we have to strengthen our connections. We have to partner and with the way that the energy ecosystem is going. We know here that the oil fields will always be our backbone here in our region. So improving energy connections starts with making our operations more efficient, reliable, and safer. Small businesses that support the oil fields. So our local businesses are our backbone here, along with the oil field industry. From transportation to construction to service providers, we have to learn how to cut costs, increase uptime with better equipment, smarter energy use, and stronger partnerships with operators. So here at the same time in the Permian Basin, moving forward, we have to be more diverse. We have to be tapping into federal and state incentives, our businesses. We have to adopt to the technology that's growing, which is on-site solar system, battery backups, energy management. These upgrades don't really replace oil or gas. They make our businesses more resilient during our times here. As we talk about our weather here, either we're extremely hot or we're extremely cold. The grid stress, we have the supply chain disruptions that impact these type of field operations. We have to make sure that we're partnering with our local energy partners, making sure we're staying and joining on workshops like these that are happening to the Hispanic energy, making sure that our connections are growing, our knowledge is growing. And finally, the biggest opportunity is collaboration. So the Permian Basin, everything works better when our local businesses, oil field operators, utilities, chambers, and organizations, when we all stay connected, sharing information, accessing training, building networks, and ensuring that our local minority businesses are not left behind in this type of energy landscapes as it evolves, because it's a never ending, it's never stays the same, it's always going to be evolving. We're never going to just have a set pattern in how the industry is going to go. As new bills are being passed, as new technology is coming up, we just have to make sure we attend workshops like this and make sure we're staying partnered with our energy partners.
No, thank you, Savannah. must be really exciting to be out there in the middle of all that new infrastructure, all that new business that's growing out there. And it's great. You have a
Yes,
heck of a job to do as you grow the Midland Hispanic Chamber there.
yes, we
Yeah, this next question is for the three of you, Elsa Panta, Alfonso, and Savannah. How can small businesses better position themselves to participate in the new energy and infrastructure projects? General, or as he begins to come back with us, Alfonso, will you start it for us, please?
Sure, sure. I can relate very much to small businesses. We've through the years, I've seen my grandfather start, from very humble beginnings, and certainly have worked um, to help being getting involved in the industry. But really primarily, Jose, I think specialization really, in the field, small businesses succeed by mastering a niche in services. Being everything to everyone is very difficult. But either you focus on frac fueling, uh, water transfer, logistics, compliance, auditing, field crews that focus on delivering consistent, high quality results in these areas will build that reputation and trust in the industry, and so compliance programs as well. Our field managers implementing, the rigorous safety, DOT, insurance, environmental protocols. Demonstrating a compliance of daily operations. It's through documented inspections, incident reporting, and proactive risk management. This all makes a small business attractive to these larger projects and larger corporations. And then there's of course consortiums and joint ventures. Small businesses, as capital is always very difficult, and so trying to small operators should often try to join forces, to pull equipment, share best practices, and bid so that you can bid on these larger contracts. Field teams collaborating across companies, leveraging collective experience and resources to meet, these project requirements. And then probably most importantly is the relationship building. In the Permian, field relationships are, paramount. I can't put it, it's probably half of the game almost. But that reliability, responsiveness, and integrity in your day-to-day operations often outweigh the price or scrutiny. Securing that repeat business and referral. So that is something that you never want to compromise. Is your reputation.
Well, thank you, Alfonso.
Jose, I didn't catch the question because
I'll get to you, General, because you have been a leader in the energy sector and small business for many years, and have done a fantastic job in growing a lot of those businesses. And the question is, how can small businesses better position themselves to participate in a new energy infrastructure projects?
Well, a couple of things. One is try not to bite off the full apple at one time. Try to get into being a part of the development. And there's a couple of ways you do it. You do it as a non-working interest owner, but you've got a piece of the action. And then you can then get the kind of financing to back you up or the equity that you need. So that's the first way, is to try to focus on what you can do and how you can get into the game. And as far as how a small business, well, you can either get into what we call at the refinery gate. And I think my colleague that was Alfonso was talking directly because he's in that kind of business, is how do you take it from the gate all the way to where it needs to be offloaded, either at the dock, if it's going to be shipped, or if it's going to be gone right to an end user. So there's a whole area of supply chain that our people can get into as a small business, or even it can be a trucking company that wants to start to get into, start out maybe with what we did with the airport with Chesapeake, we had to haul all our water. They wouldn't let us do a deep well to where we could have a disposal well on site because it's on the airport acreage. So you then create the ability to bring in a small business that can truck all that water that's got to be that basically it's what we pump down in the well if we had that disposal well because it's not clean water, let me put it bluntly. So that's one way you can do it. The other way is just try to figure out where the opportunities are and figure if you can get next to the right company that is looking for that kind of participation. But then you can syndicate what you need as far as equity that in order to buy into that kind of thing. So that, there's a lot of ways you can do it, but there's opportunities out there. So what I'm really suggesting is, Jose, is raise your horizons. It's great to talk about workers, and that's where a lot of them are in the field. It's great to talk about education and trade, and I'm a believer in that. It's even getting, more focused in the future. But how do we really build the kind of worth that we can hire our own young people and help develop them? Well, you got to get in the game and you got to get with the big boys. And so I wish there was we used to have a company that one of our presidents, H.W. Bush, was one of the owners, called Zapata Oil and Gas out of Mexico, in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, I'd like to, maybe we can get a Nino or a Zapata Oil and Gas company again going.
Okay, thank you very much, General. Savannah, you are surrounded by a lot of small businesses, and these are the small businesses that are, their backbone. They support a lot of these other folks, whether they're trucking companies, whether water companies, and so on, even if it's just pushing paper. But there is a lot even more, because whether it comes to plumbing contractors and so on, the bigger ones need to be directed. So talk a little bit about what the chamber is doing and how it's supporting them so that we can move forward on this particular issue to participate in energy and infrastructure within the project at the level that where you guys are working right now.
Yes, sir. So I really liked how Alfonso had said about like your niche. You have to, when you get into the oil industry, people they know that is our gold here. That is our bread and butter here is the oil industry. So people just want to jump in, and sometimes they don't know exactly what they're actually getting into. And that's the dangerous part. So we always push. We get people that come in from Chihuahua, that come in from Argentina, that they want to open up oil field companies here. We talk them and walk them to the beginning, from OSHA regulations all the way up to how are you going to operate? Have you seen the way that the laws and the bills are here different? So we encourage them to come to our networking events. We love to call the chamber, we call it a hub for our community. If we don't know, we will make sure that we find someone that knows. So we do a lot of networking and a lot of connection, because we have to be able to make sure we grow our partnerships with our members, with Chevron, with Conoco. There are some of our members that we have, ProPetro, and we make sure that we build a strong relationship with them, because that relationship will carry on to our members, or to our soon-to-be members, and they will be the ones that will connect them on how to be a proper vendor, how to actually get on their vendor list. We attended a Blue Wave program with Encore, and I thought that program was going to be amazing. We sent it out to our members. We pushed and advocated, please join this workshop. It's going to help you. It's going to see if your company can actually get on their vendor list. They opened up an opportunity that some people didn't even know what Blue Wave was. And that's what here at the chamber, we're very community centered. And that's how we feel that you can grow and thrive any industry, from oil fields into a local restaurant, is just the connections, making sure you're showing up to these workshops, to these business expos, to any type of the state of oil, whenever they address it, with Chevron or Conoco being the speakers. We have to make sure we push that on our soon-to-be owners, our business owners, so they can grow their knowledge and get connected into the next level.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Savannah. And, as you move forward, it was talked a little bit earlier about meeting OSHA standards, about dealing with permits and the legal side of this whole program. Olman, can you, and Olman is one of my colleagues on the board, uh, what are some of the legal issues that are important to the companies that are now operating in the Permian or seek to operate there, whether they're huge or in between?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here with this panel. I think I'll take the time to give kind of like a brief, overview of some general legal principles. I prepared a PowerPoint. Let me see if I can get this, do my share screen here and get this going. Let me see. Let me see, has that popped up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, so this is a very brief overview, just touching on some basic principles. So basically, one of the fundamental issues in oil and gas for whether you're in the Permian or anywhere in the country is that the law kind of recognizes this distinction between owning surface rights and property and owning mineral rights and property. And that's going to be the basis of so much of the oil and gas industry is built on that, in a way, on that distinction from a legal perspective. I think one of the a way to grasp on what are the legal issues involved is to think about what kind of documents, as an attorney, we're dealing with documents all the time, but kind of understanding the basic documents becomes a shorthand to, introduce yourself to the legal issues. So kind of the three common agreements that come up all the time. There's the oil and gas lease. That's at the center of everything. That's what gives an oil company the right to come on someone's land and to start extracting oil and to start do activities on the land. Then the question is, well, how do these oil companies, if you're starting out, where do you raise the capital before you're producing? Well, you go to investors, and more often than not, the agreement with investors will be like a limited partnership or an LLC, and you'll use that as the mechanism to bring in capital. Another type of agreement that comes up is as a company maybe starts to operate, you might find that there's two companies that have adjoining fields or have leases in adjoining areas, but it turns out it kind of wouldn't make sense for them to cooperate and to jointly operate a field. And those situations, there's different kinds of agreements these companies might enter into. One might be a joint operating agreement, which will then allow them to share costs and responsibilities to more efficiently develop a field. But like I said, at the core of the industry is the oil and gas lease, and just want to cover on some basic issues that you'll see in an oil and gas lease. They can be 20, 30, 100 pages long, many types of provisions, but at the core, you can have some of these provisions. First is the granting clause, and that's the provision that establishes a legal relationship and will define the land that the oil company can enter into and will define what they can do on that land. Then another one, a common clause, would be the duration, right? And in most contracts, you hear people talk about the term. What's the term of the agreement? In the oil and gas leases, the term is often referred to as the habendum clause. It's kind of a funny name, but if you hear the habendum clause, it just determines how long the lease will be in effect, which then, of course, means how long that company can actually be on someone's land producing oil. Royalty and payments. That's right. If you're a landowner, that's what you care about. What am I going to get for my royalty to allow you guys to come onto my land? Those are usually just a percentage of overall production, and it's all open to negotiation. There is no one size fits all. In California, where I'm at, seeing between 12 to 18% is kind of common. And my understanding that in the Permian, it's not unusual to see landowner royalties of maybe up to 25%. So that's kind of unique in the area. Probably reflects competitive issues, and the landowners there are negotiating good leases for themselves. And
Okay.
finally, and then another important aspect of an oil and gas lease is, hey, what happens when it's over, right? If you're the landowner and someone has built 50 wells on your farm, who's going to clean it up? When the field is dried up and the oil company moves on. So a lease should have provisions that deal with termination issues and operating issues.
Okay.
Those are some fundamental aspects of an oil and gas lease. And you touched on this, but in addition to the documents, there's lots of other legal issues that any operating company is going to come across. Environmental liability is always a big thing, and in the Permian, as it continues to build out and as the production begins to be more intensive, things happen, right? Oil is heavy industrial process, things happen. So so accidents are to be expected, and so environmental liability issues are going to be there. The question is, how do you respond to it? How do you try to foresee those issues? And
And as
are
you
you
move forward
ready
with
to?
this, Oman, excuse me,
What's that?
as you move forward with these legal issues and so on, because we're coming down to our closing time, what is your final thoughts on the legal issues here?
Yeah, just I've come across issues that are going on in the Permian. Theft and security, it turns out, is a big thing. Theft of oil products, and Governor Abbott has recently signed 4 separate bills to address theft and safety issues in the Permian. I think that's really important. Water and environmental disputes. There was recently a case from the Supreme Court of Texas, Cactus Water Services, basically saying that any kind of water that gets produced from an oil, from an oil well is going to belong to the leasee, the leaseholder. And then finally, plugging in and abandonment. Again, there's so much production going on, and so many wells are being drilled. Down the road, you're going to have an issue of orphan wells. What happens when it dries up? The lessee is no longer there, and who's left to foot the bill and be responsible to clean up these abandoned and idle wells?
Well, thank
There you
you.
go. Yeah. So
Thank you very much, General. What are your final thoughts on today's seminar here?
Well, first of all, thank you, Jose Perez and you, Jose, to try to pull us together. I think the critical thing is that, number one, don't try to be the owner of the whole 9 yards. There's ways to get into this to where you minimize your exposure. And I had mentioned what's called a non-working interest owner, where the big guys are the ones that are taking all the impact as far as whether it's the drilling, whether it's the cleanup, whether it's the environmental, whatever. But if you can raise enough money because you've got a small piece, what's called non-working interest, so you're not having to run it all, then guess what? Then you're part of the win. The other is to try to then really focus on what are the things that our lawyer friend just went through, is to really be focused on what exposure that you're willing to take, because one thing you can find out about oil and gas, there's a lot of people that made money and a lot of people that lost it very quickly. My experience with our company, when we started it in 2006, and the Barnett Shale here, it was $13 an MCF. At the end of 2009, I had to actually sell before I went upside down because it went down to $2 an MCF. So you got to really be careful and how you get into, whether it's natural gas. In oil, it's much more stable. But just remember that when you're drilling an oil well, you don't recover more than about 30 to 40%. The rest of it is already there. And now you got to go enhance it. That's why you need the big guys to come in with it. And then if you can be part of that. And so the last is buy a stripper well. Stripper wells are 5 barrels a day or less, and you get them for, a nickel on the dollar. And then you can try to see how you can work it and build your base. So those are my inputs, Jose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's everybody here. You have the most experience out of all of us. You've been in the energy business so long, beginning over at ARCO. Alfonso, in your trucking, you did a great job. You guys constantly, you're moving all over Texas and into other states. Thank you for joining us and giving us your thoughts. Savannah, you have a long job ahead of you with small business in Midland, and we'll be coming back to you
Yes.
in Midland next year. So
Awesome.
get ready for us. And of course, Alfonso is going to truck us there, and we'll be protected by our legal counsel over here, Oman, who will have all the rules and regulations for us. But thank you, everybody, for being with us today. Mil gracias. Kim?
Say thank you so much for moderating the panel, and a very special thank you to all the panelists. Very insightful conversation. Moving on, I'd like to now, we're going to move into our environmental session. We welcome Stephanie Asher, who is PhD from Permian Realization Manager for ExxonMobil Unconventional, who will speak on emissions, leak prevention, and environmental predictions, for the upcoming years. Dr. Asher, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for inviting me to speak here. This is a subject that I am super passionate about. In ExxonMobil, I started this effort in 2022 as the first methane monitoring manager in our Permian Basin. And I have been very active in our sustainability space in Permian since. Went from methane, and then I was the Permian water manager, and now as the uh, our unconventional programs manager, I touch many of the projects that are in our unconventional assets that have to do with sustainability and bringing it to our remote operations facility like Comet. So I do have a PowerPoint because that is very much the ExxonMobil way. So I'm going to share my screen hopefully with everyone. And just dive into this topic. I have about 15 minutes, but I really hope to have some healthy question and answer when this is over. Just want to first frame, ExxonMobil's position, and I was able to be at the beginning of this and heard the really great kickoff notes in about, the position of the Permian for our energy challenge that is coming up. And that is very consistent to ExxonMobil's perspective. And we really like to talk about the and equation here. Climate change is real. ExxonMobil is very much behind that. We've signed the Paris Accord, and it does stand as one of the major challenges that we have with the world. But in parallel, we also have a energy poverty globally, and the Permian is really positioned to meet that energy demand that the world needs. So it really is an and equation of how do we provide that energy while also reducing emissions and making sure that the world is in a better place. So we have some numbers on this page that are from ExxonMobil's Global Energy Outlook, and it shows that we have a 15% increase in energy demand, while at the same time we need to have a net zero initiative of emissions by 2050. And in fact, in 2022, ExxonMobil released our Permian net zero initiative so that we're going to achieve net zero by 2030. With the Pioneer acquisition, we have committed to getting the Pioneer assets to net zero by 2035, as they had a 2030 initiative, or they had a 2050 initiative, and we're trying to accelerate that. Working with my slides there. In order to do that, we have several sustainability focus areas within ExxonMobil, and advancing climate solution is just one of those 14. I heard water in the previous session. I'm very passionate about water in the Permian, and so conserving water resources is also on here, including other sustainability about investing in our people, which has also been discussed today, and also focusing on personal safety is just kind of some of the ones of our 14 pillars. But specifically focusing on advanced climate solutions, about 1 out of every $5 of our CapEx in our current company plan is going to go towards lower emissions investment. So we expect to spend about $30 billion in that area. A lot of that is going to go towards some of our lower carbon solutions, new businesses. But since the Permian is a strategic objective to our organization, a lot of that, a very healthy chunk of that goes into Permian investment. So this is something that we are really being very mindful of in investing. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to do there. But first, I want to just cover really quickly some of our focus areas and targets because we are being very explicit in our 2030 emissions reduction plan. So, on a corporate perspective, what we want to do is reduce the GHG intensity between 30 and 20%. We want to be able to have flaring intensity to go down to almost 80%, and we've achieved a 60% reduction in the Permian so far. Methane intensity, we have an objective to go down to 80%, and in the Permian, we've already reduced that methane intensity down to 60%. And in our upstream GHG intensity, we have a similar goal that we're trying to get down corporate wide. And we're going to be doing that through applying the Scope 1 and Scope 2 GHG emissions reductions across the board. And we're going to do these, we're going to meet these objectives by a roadmap. So we've been very explicit about how to achieve these goals. We're going to first detect non-routine sources. And so that is our roadmap objective of methane monitoring. And that is our first objective. And so that's one of the things that we're going to talk about on the next slide. But that's an objective, a very achievable objective, and something that we're spearheading in the Permian. The next one is we're going to eliminate known routine sources, and we're achieving that through electrification of our operations. So we have a large initiative right now to electrify our operations. We've been able to electrify our drilling rigs, and we're working right now on electrifying our frac fleet. And the last kind of pillar of this in categories is eliminating potential non-routine and routine sources. So this is our objective to have zero flare. We've already been able to achieve zero routine flare. We've also have a large program to replace pneumatic devices. And then we are progressing forward our overall facility designs to a tankless operation. And this is an objective to just really eliminate from designs any potential thing that we know is going to leak, or inherently by its design is meant to vent. And we're doing this not just for the environmental perspectives, because as I started off with, this is an and equation. On the face value, it seems like these things are very costly CapEx expenses. But what we have found is that not only does it achieve these environmental objectives, but it's just good business sense, because in the end, it keeps the product in the pipe. And that is that increases our overall production, and it increases our overall sales. So there is an economic incentive for us to make these changes as part of the and equation. And I think that that's something that people don't necessarily think of when they talk about reducing emissions. Now, how we're going to be doing this beyond along this roadmap, and specifically for methane monitoring, which is what I can speak to the most, is what we've done and what we're doing. And this is the slide that I'm going to stay on the longest, is because this is where I've had the largest footprint and can speak to the most knowledgeably. So in the Permian, in 2022, in 2021, we implemented a technology evaluation program where we were evaluating all of the methane monitoring technology that was available to the market. It is a very dynamic market. There's a lot of different technology that is being developed, and we want to continue to encourage that. We set some standards of what we would consider qualified technology, and we determined that the best approach was a multi-layered approach where we have both ground sensors at the site. We also partner with vendors to do flyovers, and then as well as being able to leverage the public satellite data that is going on so that you ultimately have a data integration of multiple data points in order to help facilitate a better understanding of your methane environment. Since we have done that, we did that in 2021. So in 2022, we determined which equipment we considered qualified, and we started at that point in time doing a deployment campaign of deploying those sensors across our field. And we currently have the largest scaled application of methane detection. We implement all of that data and it all funnels into COMET, which is it's an acronym for the Center for Operations for Methane Emissions Tracking, and it is located in Houston, Texas. At that COMET location, we have some highly qualified operators that are 24/7 getting both operational data through our SCADA system as well as indications from our methane emissions sensors. And what they're able to do is get those alerts and cross-reference them against operational data and determine whether or not the emissions event is a real event or if it is a consequence of a maintenance activity or whether or not it's an overpressurization and therefore no action is needed. If there is an event that is needed, that the COMET will then dispatch our regulatory maintenance organization, and they will then be dispatched to site in order to remediate and address the emissions event. And we have a target of from event detection to remediation of less than 4 hours, and we're doing pretty well at it. Of course, all of this program required for us to staff up this organization. And so we have a group of highly motivated individuals who are supporting this program. And we really, and that has really been instrumental for us to drive this change. Since 2022, when we started this program, we've really been focusing on deployment and executing all of these sensors throughout the field. And I'm very excited to see towards the end of that. So we expect that at the end of this year, we will have deployed almost all of the sensors on our critical key sites. And so that's on the page here on what we're doing. And so at the end of this year, we'll complete that program and then focus then on optimizing and continue to develop. We try to take a very lean based approach in terms of continuous improvement, both in the technology area, but also in the workflow as we continuously improve, how we're approaching understanding the sensors and getting field feedback. Additionally, we are working to eliminate our routine flaring at our Permian Basin sites through implementation of additional technology through things like auto chokes, as well as a dynamics matrix control project that is leveraged from our downstream facilities. And so you can see and hear from this that it's a technology focus. And so one of the things that I want to emphasize with that is that technology focus is done in partnership. And so we're really trying to work with a lot of different vendors and also academia and research organizations to progress forward technology. And the thing that we want to emphasize, or at least I want to emphasize, is that we're not doing this in a vacuum, nor are we trying to keep this proprietary. So all of these technologies are available and they scale in cost. So some of our sensors are very, very inexpensive. And so it's just a quick win for you to be able to put those on your site and be able to understand the scope of what is happening at your facilities. This has enabled us also to achieve a gold standard in our the OGMP 2.0. That's really important for us for a global market perspective, but it's also quite an honor for us to be able to achieve that so early in our in our methane monitoring journey. Other things that I do want to say, note on this page is that since the Permian was a spear tip for ExxonMobil in the fact that it was the first that were been implemented, one of the things that we're now focusing on is leveraging those learnings on a global basis. So we've been able to share this information just within ExxonMobil, and so now we're deploying this technology and this and these workflows and procedures to our North Dakota assets, as well as our global assets, including our refineries. So we're very excited to basically raise the ships of all of ExxonMobil's assets in terms of methane monitoring. I believe that that is my 15 minutes, and I do want to honor the contract. So I am going to wrap it up there. Very clearly, I could speak ad nauseum for a long time on this topic, but I want to honor the question and answer part of this today's session. So happy to take any questions available.
Yes, Dr. Asher, we do have one. It's coming in. A question is, for ExxonMobil, how much does the Permian account for onshore production in the U.S.? And does the Permian production compare, how does it compare with offshore production?
Excellent question. I don't know. I don't know specific numbers. I can tell you that our Permian assets are approximately a third of our production in the upstream. I cannot tell you a ratio of that compared to all of our deepwater or offshore assets, but it is a strategic priority for ExxonMobil. So it's a very exciting place to work, even within ExxonMobil.
I have a question as well pertaining to y'all's recent entrance into the Permian Basin was somewhat new for you all, even though y'all are in every single area when we talk about energy. But the fact that you are using new technology to continue to drive down methane, continue to look at the environment, truly is very noble. But the fact that you all are also not keeping this just within ExxonMobil, you're willing to share the latest data in which you guys are putting out this information and trying to help other companies that may or may not have so much money in R&D to help them. And so it's more or less to me a license to operate in this day and age. And so where do you see the research that's coming out of the Permian Basin? How will it be shared with other facilities of ExxonMobil, such as maybe your ethanol cracker plants, refineries? Can all of these different facilities of ExxonMobil utilize what you're learning specifically out of the Permian Basin?
Absolutely. So our Comet location where we're bringing in all of the methane data, because we have satellite data, we are already looking globally at our ExxonMobil assets, and contacting those assets if we do see anything on the satellites, because a lot of our locations are co-located and clustered with other operators. We've also been able to reach out to other operators if we do see something. So we're really trying to be very open in this space and make sure that we're communicating as much as possible. And that's just the satellites. For the sensors, we have internally a community of practice and a global GHG organization looking at strategically how do we apply this in sort of rate and pace, for our assets. Some of the technology isn't applicable everywhere. For example, camera detection, the spectrum for methane is very similar to water. So putting a FLIR camera or a standalone methane detection camera offshore is potentially not going to work because you will just constantly be an alarm. So we're still in the trial phase, and that's why I said the technology continues to evolve, and we will continue to participate in that. And so we've now pivoted to really, instead of just focusing on the Permian, is really looking at how do we broaden the application of these technologies. And also, as those other assets particularly like our refineries, who potentially are not just looking for methane, but they're looking for benzene and NOx and SOx. As they trial technology, they're also providing information back to us as well. As the Permian assets are very unique unto their own compared to offshore. And so trying to just share lessons learned as much as possible.
Well, Dr. Asher, that is all the time we have for now. I was not able to get to one last question, unfortunately, to stay on track. But we do thank you for joining us today. Your information was very insightful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me just stop sharing and head this back to you.
Now we're moving on to building the workforce and supporting communities. Our next session focuses on one of the most critical components in the Permian Basin's future, and of course, that's the workforce and the communities that support it. We'll explore education, training, and career pathways for the next generation of energy professionals, as well as community challenges, including housing, infrastructure, education, and public safety, including healthcare. Moderating this session will be Dr. Jack Valdez, who is he's an industrial account manager for AIS Industrial and Construction Supply, and his panelists will include Naomi Lujan Perez, who is the Director of State Government Relations for HACU, as well as Luis Sanchez, former County Commissioner, Precinct 3, Midland County. Dr. Valdez, please take it away.
Thank you, Kim. And just for clarification, I am the Senior Director at, this is not your fault, but National Electrical Manufacturers Association, focused on regulatory and industrial affairs for everything from industrial automation to smart manufacturing, industrial cores, pumps, motors, etc. I appreciate the introduction. My former role was at the Department of Energy, focused on manufacturing and energy supply chains. So as we think about from the mineral to the market and everything in between, how do we make sure that we have the investments in this country to maintain a global presence and really keep that dynamic effort moving across this country. I've also worked in advanced manufacturing, the U.S. Senate on energy and natural resources, and I'm a recovering academic as a former engineer and physicist, got a PhD in biogeochemistry, and worked originally from Texas, first 30 years in Texas. So worked with 3 different oil and gas firms, both boutique and large. So with that, I want to ask my colleagues to come off or come onto the cameras if we can. Y'all know a little bit about me now, and I'm really excited to get this going. And I think we're just going to kind of keep this really, Luis, if you're around, just really comfortable and easy. I think the unique thing that we have about this is we look at it from both a national landscape, and then Luis will be able to kind of give us a little bit more perspective on what's happening or what's happened at a local level and how we think about these efforts. So I really appreciate everybody joining. I will start with Noemi. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about your background, that'd be great.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. My name is Noemi Lujan Perez. I want to first thank Hispanics in Energy for hosting this event. They have been a great partner to the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities and a great champion for us in helping connect us and our schools to energy and the affiliated industries. The Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities represents a network of over 600 federally designated Hispanic serving institutions. In Texas alone, we have a network of over 110 of these institutions. What do these institutions mean? What are they of value to workforce development and industries overall? Hispanic serving institutions, by and large, have a quarter representation of Latinos enrolled in their institutions. But beyond that, they service low-income students across all races and ethnicities. In fact, they have the highest concentration of African-American Native American, Asian Pacific Islander students, et cetera, et cetera. So when industries partner with HSIs, they are partnering with vehicles of social mobility for low-income students, period. You're not only accessing Latinos, you're accessing low-income students overall. Part of the workforce development pathway, bottom line, is connecting high talent to opportunities. When you're looking for high talented skills, go to us. Of note, and this is of significance for workforce development, 37 states nationwide, 37 governors have prioritized workforce development priorities as part of their efforts to help educational structures connect their students to workforce development opportunities. We know that the energy sector is the fastest growing sector nationwide, and we want to make sure that our institutions are top of mind for that service. We are not only connecting homegrown talent from K through 12, right, going into our 2-year and or 4-year institutions and transferring therein. We are connecting those communities that they serve or that they represent to jobs. So again, when you are connecting to our institutions, you're connecting to low-income homegrown talent, and those students in turn help feed or help the local economies where they live, where they come from, survive and maintain social mobility sectors. The other piece of the puzzle as it relates, and I'm sharing all of this because therein lies the value chain, if you will, on workforce development and education, right? When we partner with our institutions, or I should say when industries partner with our institutions, you are helping our educators. Dr. Valdez, speaking of academicians, right? You are partnering and connecting with our academicians and our institutions learn and understand the new developments and skill sets, the new development and needs, right? As those industries evolve, so do the needs, so does the science. So there is a direct correlation there in terms of connecting with our industries. I can't go on without saying this. And again, HIE understands they've been a partner to Hispanics in Energy and has, or I should say to HACU, and has helped HACU connect to the energy sector. HACU does have a new workforce development initiative that is aligned with the current priorities, if you will, federally and state, in line with the value needs that are needed from the industry side of the sector. And we're aligning, we're evolving. Again, that is part of that value add, right? Of making sure that industries are connected to our institutions. So we're here. Part of it is just simply connecting the dots. That's part of the workforce development and part of our role in the value chain. Thank you.
Great. And did we get Luis on the line?
Yes, sir. I'm working on that right now. There we go.
Here he is. All right. Loud and clear. Go ahead if you want to give yourself an introduction.
How's it going, Zach? My name is Luis Sanchez, former county commissioner here in Midland County, Precinct 3. I'm currently now the director of the Cogdo Learning Center for Midland College in South Midland. So my experience in working as a county commissioner now, brought it over to the academic side. So very happy to be here. And I want to thank Hispanics in Energy for the invitation and very excited about this conversation. Been hearing some very good panelists here. So for sure, looking forward to it. One of the things I know that we were talking about is the importance of workforce and education and career paths. Just to kind of give some information here, 43% of Midland is Hispanic, which means over 73 Latinos live in Midland, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Right now, a question would be, how do we leverage the existing value to build a future for what's going on here in Midland? And some of the challenges that exist. Our community is growing. We have some challenges. For example, I'll start off with housing. I know that's something that we look at, especially in the oil and gas industry, but not only that, even for some of our folks that live here career-wise. Here in Midland, approximately there's a 33.4% increase in home values. So there's a challenge in a severe shortage of affordable housing options. And housing options in general, right? So what does that mean? It means that the vast majority of our folks that work in the oil industry, which is about 30% of Midland workforce, is in oil and gas. Means that we have a lot of folks that work in the oil and gas who are looking for the same homes that our educators are looking for, that our healthcare workers are looking for. So that's a very big challenge that we're facing here in Midland. Now, I think it's a good challenge, because you can always overcome those things. But I think it's a great opportunity for businesses. Here we are talking about Hispanics in energy and business folks that are listening in right now. So I can guarantee you that there's opportunities here for housing here in Midland to be able to increase that housing, to make it more affordable, but really to have units that are available in general for folks that live out here. So I wanted to start off with that, with the housing and the challenges that we face. In addition to that, I think another thing that we've also talked about in the past has been roads and safety and the development of roads and infrastructure. I know that's been talked about. Earlier, Cesar Blanco was on, and I know he was talking about 50% of the workforce here is Hispanic and modernizing infrastructure. For sure, I agree. I think there's things that we're doing now currently. So, for example, our local interstate here, Interstate 20, is being expanded currently from a 4-lane road to a 6-lane road. We have 2 more interstates that are about to be built here in Midland, Interstate 27, which is going to help with safety and economic growth here in the area, and also the I-14 corridor that's going to run from Midland, Texas, all the way to Georgia, in the northeastern part of Georgia. Hopefully that's going to make us a regional hub, and it's going to connect the Permian Basin energy industry to the eastern border of the United States. So there are challenges, but at the same time, there's opportunities. And opportunities in roads, again, to be able to find companies that can come out here and help build some of these roads to continue to grow in safety.
Yeah, Luis, I really appreciate that, providing a little bit more of a contextual, local perspective on what the opportunities look like. Can you maybe, we'll start with you, Luis, and then maybe Noemi, you can jump in. But when you think about preparing the next generation of energy professionals, what gaps do you see today between talent supply and industry demand? And so maybe, Luis, you can talk about like what it looks like at a local level, and then maybe you can talk about what you're seeing at a national level that may be pertaining to the Permian region.
You bet, Zach. Some of the things that we're looking at currently is to be able to have homegrown talent here in Midland. To be able to grow our own from the kiddos that are in junior high to high school, and maybe even into college. I know that there's a demand for skilled workers here in the Permian Basin. Currently, Midland College has a petroleum academy in conjunction with the Midland Independent School District to be able to start creating some of those highly skilled jobs. According to the Department of Energy, we know that there's going to be a projected growth of about 23%, I believe, in 2030 here in Texas in these type of highly skilled oil and gas technical jobs. And so for us to be able to prepare that, we want to grow our own talent to help ease the pressure in some of that workforce. We want to continue to provide opportunities for young people that can go into classes like diesel technology, transportation, and CDL, essential skills that are needed in the oil and gas industry. And not only that, Zach, another thing that we are also focusing on are the folks that currently live here that maybe do not dominate the English language, right? A lot of our ESL folks that are wanting to learn English. So we are providing a lot of that as well. So that way folks can enter the workforce, can learn English, can get their GED. We can help them to move from ESL into college courses. And as they're moving into these college courses, start focusing them into the oil and gas industry. Because, the thing is, the folks are already here. Now, all we need to do is help them get into the pipeline, give them the resources to educate themselves, and give them the same opportunities that are available for anybody that wants to take those opportunities.
Yeah, that's a great transition, I think, to what Haku is trying to do. Maybe you can jump in.
Again, it's key to talk about homegrown talent, right? So often when we look at industries and looking to fill positions, they have to recruit from out of state. And yet there are portions in those states, wherever you are in America, right, that is in need of funding, in need of support, in need of jobs. So making sure that we're working with industries at the state level so that they're looking at homegrown talents. That's one. There's another key area of void that Haku has stepped in, and it's directly tied to our mission and scope of work, and that is the 4-year component of institutions that exist nationwide. We know that, again, nationwide, there are 37 states that have workforce development priorities. By far, they are connected to 2-year institutions, community colleges. Proud community college alum here. Proud community college alum here, right? So we have stepped into the void to help industries and help states understand the role that 4-year institutions have in these, right? We know that there are specific jobs, high-skilled talent jobs that exist for students coming fresh out of high school, students coming out of 2-year programs for specific certifications, but there are also needs for professional level workforce talent from degrees from 4-year institutions, right? We still need our representation at the executive level as well. We also forget that oftentimes these industries don't just need professionals in STEM, they need professionals that fill the voids in accounting, HR, legal compliance, all of the other components that exist within corporate America. We are there. And again, which is why we always point to our network of institutions. We not only can supply that high skilled talent, right? But with us, you work and are able to recruit across all these spaces and groups of communities that are impacted, from low income rural communities, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it's about being able to tap into workforce talent, right? And being able to see these industries as social mobility vehicles and connecting them to our schools. One of the things that is often discussed by unions and labor sectors is the need to fill in those positions that have turnover, either because of sectors that are aging, right? Labor sectors that are aging, and making sure that there's a fresh supply of workforce talent. So part of it is just simply connecting the dots. All right, industries, where are those sectors where you need a fresh supply of talent? Help us understand so that we can in turn help our schools understand, and thereby again connecting that supply chain, that talent chain, helping our schools and educators understand where they need to continue focusing the training on.
Yeah, and I want to dig in a little bit more on that, Noemi, because I want to follow that thread, and we'll get to you, Luis. But specifically for Noemi, how are your institutions adapting to the changes in energy economy, right? If we look back, 2 years ago, we were focused on hydrogen and we were focused on renewables, and so I think growing up in Texas, I've seen oil and gas be consistent throughout my lifetime. But how are your institutions adapting to the rapid changes in sort of the energy economy that you're talking about? And then Luis, maybe you can talk about how your communities are adapting.
And let me just point the obvious, right? It is continuously rapid changing. We're dealing with a new White House administration that has shifted priorities around energy. And so part of it is just staying connected. With that said, and I know that Hispanics in energy can speak to this at great length. With that said, the energy sector will continue to grow. So any shift, political shift that may shift from, say, hydrogen to oil, doesn't really need or does not shift the priority around hydrogen needs, right? In fact, many of the oil companies, and I know that there was a representative here from ExxonMobil, right? Many of these companies alone have hydrogen priorities, and that work continues to advance. I think the overall component here is keeping up with STEM changes or science evolution. Where are those needs? We know that hydrogen as an innovation has been in existence now for 20 plus years and will continue to grow and evolve. So we know that's not going anywhere. We know that oil continues to be an energy sector, regardless and irrespective of the political communication, right? So that industry will continue to exist. So it's staying focused on the academic and training needs, right? Staying focused on specifically what that growth and an area of need is for those sectors. We just need to continue to stay focused. And obviously, as evolution and technology continues to advance, say AI and the application of AI in the energy sector, right? We just need to make sure that our institutions are connected to that change. So with that is, again, the connection to industries, hearing from those professionals, those researchers from industry, so that they can teach our schools, all right, this is where we're going. This is what we're shifting to, right? So it's continuing to connect the dots and stay connected. Again, just because the political discourse changes doesn't mean that the actual energy supply changes. It doesn't. That work continues.
Yeah, and I would say the energy supply is needed now more than ever. And so, Luis, I think some of it, quite a bit of it, has switched to how can we develop more natural gas opportunities and fossil energy. And so, how are your communities adapting to the rapid changes? And I'm sure they've seen it over decades, right?
Yeah, I think something that Noemi just talked about is affecting everybody in any industry, right? Which is AI. We do have to keep that into consideration of how things are rapidly changing. It seems like AI is just changing on the daily, right? To the point where it's kind of hard to keep up. According to there's a group here called the Permian Strategic Partnership. It's represented by 20 of the major oil companies here in Midland. And according to PSP, by 2050, by 2050, the world is going to require almost 50% more energy than what's being produced today. Now, if we're responsible with our investment, our development, especially investing and developing in our young people, to be able to, going back to homegrown folks, the Permian Basin is going to have the power to deliver and continue to play a critical role in supplying those global needs, because once we start growing them, I believe, here locally, we can start filling in these positions, and from there they can grow not only here in the Permian Basin, but be able to move elsewhere and grow in that. So much is tied in oil and gas that I know we keep talking about oil and gas, right? But oil and gas is not the only thing that is focused on here. When you talk about roads, I mean, you've got to find companies that know how to build roads to be able to develop those roads. When you talk about healthcare, right? You're going to have healthcare professionals, because if your population continues to grow, you're going to have to be investing in those folks as well, right? So going back, how do we remain competitive here? Is going back and coming up with innovative ideas to start capturing these young folks in the primary schools and in high school, for them to start taking some of these roles and jobs that people are going to start retiring, or that these jobs are just going to continue to grow. So we've got to find creative ways. And again, with Midland College here, currently at the Cogdo Learning Center, we do try to focus on some of that in creative, innovative ways to get some of our young people interested, give them a little bit of taste of what it could be, because when you're young, you don't think about this stuff, right? But if we can start getting young people enticed in what oil and gas looks like, how can I become a leader in that industry? And again, we're going to need accountants, we're going to need presidents, we're going to need CEOs. So not just the day-to-day stuff, but really start focusing on some of these young people who are going to have to take some of these leadership positions.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I know we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to weave in an audience question here, which is, when we think about educating the Hispanic community, the energy community, so much of it needs to be voiced in the values of the people that are working there. And we know the Hispanic community will work hard. They want to excel. They want to grow. They want to be in these positions of leadership and growth. And so how do you incorporate nonprofit organizations that support these types of students to create long-term impact for the industry and the students it serves and the communities in which they're involved? We'll start with Luis and then maybe go to Noemi.
You bet. Zach, I think the best way to start it is to start getting young people interested. Just because people live in Midland, Odessa, doesn't mean that they know everything about oil and gas. So I think it's incumbent upon us to start introducing these young folks to the oil and gas industry to help them understand the importance of it. And how do you do that? I mean, there's programs that can happen during the summer. There's camps that you can start hosting in regards to oil and gas. And those are some of the things that we are currently looking at, where we can start bringing in kiddos from the high schools to start learning more about it. That way they can start asking questions and hopefully they start getting more interested in it. I think that's the way to begin, to really start introducing what we currently have. I think sometimes we take it for granted that everybody knows about oil and gas. Everybody knows what a drilling well looks like. Well, you've got a lot of folks that you see drilling wells while you're driving down the highway, but you've never been on one, right? And so we also have to keep that in mind to be able to get the folks invested in what we're doing and get them to understand what it is that we're doing here in Midland, Odessa.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, head nod to the local institution being represented here, right? Our local institutions, by and large, tend to already have their network of local NGOs they work with that help with the workforce development and talent pipeline process, right? And so it's looking at those already existing networks that have the pulse on the local communities, on the local homegrown talent, right? And then again, you know, I have to give the head nod to HIE here and Haku, right? That have the network of the national piece. We're an NGO. That's what we do. It's that talent pipeline. But locally, it's about local talent, homegrown talent. Remember that terminology, homegrown talent, and the community NGOs that have their tentacles in that space. I'll give you an example. Haku has had a long-standing internship program. It's called HSNIP, his Haku National Internship Program. It is partnered with industries. It is partnered with historically with federal agencies, state agencies, and it provides an avenue for these sectors, right, to provide hands-on experience to students from these institutions. That is one of the ways that our specific NGO is plugged in, okay? But to Luis's point, again, nodding to the local piece, that local institution and its network of local talent may already know where there's a talent pool in existence that is being developed by the K through 12 system, right? They're in high school programs. And so it's a natural fit. There are already existing networks and connections, right? And as evolution happens, part of our work is to adapt and evolve with it. But we're here, they're there, just tap into us and we'll point you to them.
Well, I want to thank my panelists, Luis and Noemi. Y'all been great. I wish we had more time because I would love to know what you're optimistic about in the next 5 years. If you want to put that in the chat for everybody else to see, that would be great, especially as we think about the energy professionals. But at this time, we really appreciate y'all. And Kim, I'll send it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Valadez, and your panel for a very insightful conversation. Moving on, our next speaker, we welcome Joseph Masta, State Auditor of New Mexico, for some special remarks. And I may, Joseph, have not pronounced your name properly. So, for formality, would you please give us your name?
Yes, it's Joseph Maestas.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm coming to you from Sky Harbor Airport, so bear with me if you hear a little background noise while I'm speaking. I do want to, give a shout out to the conveners, particularly Hispanics in energy, the sponsors, and everyone joining us today for an agenda really centered on big topics: innovation, empowering communities, and advancing resilience. As a former or recovering mayor and chairman of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission, I've seen how leadership in the Permian Basin shapes not only our economy, but the future our children inherit. Today, I want to talk about three things: responsible stewardship, regulatory certainty, and the central role Hispanic workers have in the energy sector. And again, my remarks are from the New Mexico perspective and the contribution of the Permian Basin on the New Mexico side. So why does fiscal oversight matter? Why does responsible stewardship of oil and gas revenues matter? Why does investment in community and workforce development matter? So my office as the New Mexico State Auditor, we basically audit all public entities within the state of New Mexico. But there's some key energy sector oversight agencies that we audit. I'm talking about the New Mexico Energy and Minerals and Department, the Public Regulation Commission, the New Mexico Environment Department, and the State Land Office. And these agencies impact every corner of New Mexico's economy. We manage nearly $10 billion in operating funds and $26 billion in total spending, with half going to education, but only 7% going to infrastructure. And I know that's an issue here with respect to infrastructure investment in some of these growing communities, particularly those municipalities in the Permian Basin. Now, we all remember the economic calamity of 2008, and our state at that time had to claw back funds from all sources. And so because of that PTSD, if you will, the legislature here in New Mexico made a conscious decision to set aside a 30% reserve, because we all know the nature of the oil and gas sector. It's boom and bust. But here in New Mexico, the Permian Basin is still our economic heartbeat. This is astounding. With the advent of fracking, revenues have grown from 5.3 billion in FY21 to over 13 billion today, which is over half the state's total budget. The two primary counties on the New Mexico side of the Permian Basin are Lee and Eddy counties. They produce about 95% of our oil, and more than 100,000 jobs in New Mexico depend on this sector. But we can't take this prosperity for granted, because as strong as these numbers are, the next decade can either be one of growth or a missed opportunity. I mentioned the Office of the State Auditor's oversight because we are only part of the solution. However, a key voice in the conversation is you all. Switching gears and talking about the role of Hispanics, Hispanics are not just part of the energy sector, they're the backbone of it. In New Mexico, we have almost 50% Hispanic by population proportion, the highest proportion of population outside of Puerto Rico. And Latinos make up about 46% of the oil and gas workforce, the largest demographic group in the industry. Work that is physically demanding, it's hazardous, and frankly, too many are concentrated in lower wage positions. But the next decade must be about upward mobility, ensuring Hispanic workers move into higher skill, higher wage, technical roles. And that's important to me as an engineer. I'm not a CPA, but I am an engineer and a certified fraud examiner. But these technical roles are very important as these new opportunities emerge in areas like produced water treatment and monitoring. Now I'm going to put my Public Regulation Commission hat on and talk a little bit about the regulatory environment and how it can really affect certain sectors, and in this case, the oil and gas sector. Sectors like this need stable, predictable regulation, and it shouldn't be perceived as an enemy of jobs, but the foundation of them. And really, what's at stake? We all know that regulatory stability underpins job growth and long-term investment. But however, uncertainty will, as we all know, it'll stifle hiring, it'll stifle innovation, especially for emerging sectors like produced water treatment. Predictability allows operators to plan, hire, and invest in training more Hispanic workers. So when rules change constantly, money can flow elsewhere. So the future of the Permian Basin depends on both fiscal stewardship and inclusive job growth. Hispanic leadership is needed across regulatory and the business landscape. When I was a public regulation commissioner, I think I was only one of 6 Latino public regulation commissioners across the country. And I know Hispanics in leadership or Hispanics in energy really want to raise that number, because I think there's about 126 total regulatory commissioners in the country. But the Permian can lead, but only with your engagement. Your voice shapes tomorrow's industry, because transparency and accountability build a confidence that really attracts investment. Accountable and stable regulation builds the conditions where jobs grow and families thrive. So you're not separate from this dialogue, from this conversation. You're central to it. So why does it matter? Let me be direct. Decisions about oversight, regulation, and frankly, workforce development will determine whether the next generation of Hispanic workers in the Permian Basin has opportunity or simply has to leave. And a good percentage of these Latino workers in the Permian Basin on the New Mexico side are immigrants. So that's going to be a big issue. So what's being decided right now is how strictly produced water regulations are enforced and whether they remain consistent. Is investment in workforce development tied to actual job creation? This is going to depend a lot on whether tax revenue from the Permian Basin is managed responsibly. So we're not talking about abstract questions. They're about our children's future, who shapes the energy narrative, and whether our community leads or gets left behind. So we at the moment in New Mexico political and economic history, we're kind of at a crossroads where two forces can align, and that is ensuring that you have accountable stewardship of these funds to maintain community trust. Second, stable and predictable regulation attracts investment and supports job growth and opens pathways for Hispanic workers. So I want to close by thanking you for your time and close with this message. Accountable and transparent stewardship and stable regulation of the Permian Basin will lead to continued growth and opportunities. These are not competing values. These are the foundation for the Permian Basin that works for all of us. So again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you. And again, I want to thank Hispanics in Energy, the sponsors, and all the speakers. It was a pretty high level list of speakers here. So again, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Joseph, very much. And we appreciate your insights coming from the beautiful state of New Mexico. Remarks now.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Remarks now will be provided by Tommy Gonzalez. Tommy Gonzalez is the city manager for the city of Midland, Texas. Tommy, take it away.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's an honor to join Hispanics in Energy Network. I want to start with something quite simple. When you talk about energy in this country, you have to recognize the influence and impact Hispanics have made to this industry. When you talk about the future of energy, you have to talk about the people in the community of the Permian Basin. Places like Midland, Odessa, Hobbs, Pecos, Carlsbad. Part of that's in New Mexico because this region is an energy producing area and epicenter of the American energy strength. What our role specifically, what Midland's role is, without question, we're at the heart of the epicenter with the U.S. energy production and one of the most consequential regions in the world of national security, economic stability, and global competitiveness. But with that position, as you know, comes a lot of responsibility. We have to continue to innovate, innovation like what was discussed before, and also other innovations with new fracking techniques and the evolution and improved technology with water treatment. That's really taken huge leaps and bounds, and really a lot of the municipalities, I'm the city manager of Midland, and a lot of municipalities have learned from those new technologies in the oil industry. We have to stay competitive in this field. Innovation has helped us be more competitive. Other methods like horizontal drilling has had a huge impact as well. Leading in efficiency, safety, and operational excellence of these oil operations, oil drilling operations is very, very important. When we are efficient and safe, we maximize production. The world depends on what happens in our region. That can't be overstated. And the people who make it happen, the people who anchor our strength, include the men and the women we honor today. I wanted to talk about some of the fact that we have a lot of Hispanics in the Permian Basin. We have workers, but we also have leaders and entrepreneurs. We're a large part of the oil field business here, not only in Midland, but on the whole earth. When you drive through Midland, Odessa, Pecos, and Carlsbad before sunrise, you see trucks, crews, the welders, the technicians, the pumpers, and the supervisors, and a vast majority are Hispanic. But Hispanic excellence in energy is not limited to field operations. We have executives, engineers, innovators, business owners, civic leaders, and also region-shaping entrepreneurs. I want to share a couple of those. Adrian Carrasco, President of Owner Premier Energy Services. Jennifer Solomon, Executive Vice President, Diamondback. Arcelia Acosta, CEO of Carcon Industries. In Pecos, you've got Pablo Martinez with Martinez Oilfield Services, Salgado Trucking and Oil Field Hauling. Carlsbad, you have Chief Operating Officer Lozano Oil Field Services, Javier Lozano. You also have Maria Duran, President of Duran Energy Services. In Hobbs, you have Victoria Padilla, co-owner of Zia Oilfield Services. Bobby Montoya, founder of Montoya Energy Services. So all of these people really have helped shape this region, and you have a lot of others that I did mention that came before them, and many more to come after them. Really, what this represents for us is our main industry. So Midland's growth is built on a simple philosophy that support the people who power the economy. So that means we want to streamline permitting in our side of the house. We've been able to cut the permitting process for a permit for a well inside the city limits by over 2 months. So I mean, I think that's significant, and we did that in the last 6 months. We need to have predictable development services when people deal with the city. We need to co-invest in housing, workforce, and transportation. And we need a business-friendly climate, and not just say we're just business-friendly, but actually do it with the type of things that I just mentioned. We're advancing major projects to help support business activity like airport modernization. We want to do infrastructure improvements in the quality of life space that will enable private investment and really kind of leverage the industry and the funding that's here in our own backyard. So the importance of the workforce and the talent that we need to continue to develop and evolve, and the succession that needs to take place is very important. We need skilled labor. So several of you have already mentioned that. Mentorship. We need the colleges to really prep a lot of these folks for like welding, CDL licenses, and things of that nature. So we've worked with Midland College. We've invested several millions of dollars in helping them really stand up those programs. So those type of career pathways, upskilling, automation readiness. A lot of folks mentioned AI, the AI component piece and the integration of that in the oil field operations. I think that's a huge part of the development process. We're not just doing it in the colleges. We're starting it in the high schools with apprenticeship programs, internship programs. So all of that is key to this continued development. We have to continue to also invest in our water systems. A lot of those backfill a lot of the operations that are happening in our backyard. Major roadway improvements in the different important corridors where the trucking takes place, and a lot of the sand trucking and a lot of just trucking in general takes place throughout the system network here in our backyard. Spaceport related upgrades, utilities and power grid reliability, and the work that we do with Encore and all the industry that comes through here through the Encore's distribution lines. So all of that is critically important. I know I talked about innovation and emergent technologies, but things that they're doing specifically in that space, the carbon capture and storage, automation and digital field operations, advanced drilling technologies, data-driven efficiency that I mentioned before, the public-private partnerships and the quality of life specifically that I'll give some examples. We're doing a 60+ soccer complex at Beale Park that we've partnered with the private sector. We put in 26 million, they put in 20 million. So being able to do that, doing more sports complexes, because it's one thing to support the industry directly, but some of these indirect support systems are important because a lot of these folks, we want them to live here and enjoy living here, not just feel like they're just in an oil patch and just working continuously and not able to raise a family. So those kinds of partnerships are important. We've developed FBOs, fixed-based operations at our airports, so we can fly people in and out quickly and more economically and efficient through these specific companies that work in our backyard. Quality of life, as I mentioned before, grows into great parks and trails, safe neighborhoods. We've really done a lot to work on neighborhood development programs where we do master plan communities. So again, it's a livable space here in Midland and a place that people can enjoy with recreational amenities. We're building a zoo. That's a private sector initiative that we kicked off that we were able to support. One more big thing that we did not have here in Midland to again support the industry indirectly. I mentioned the strong workforce and the work that's done there, but I have to mention the nonprofits and the help that they've had. A lot of the foundations that are here help with a lot of that development, a lot of that education, a lot of that support in that space. We have to remain regionally competitive, so we've really worked with Motran, which is the Midland Odessa Transportation Network, and also Ports to Plains, something that I worked on back in the 90s that's still alive and well. And that's a continuation and the expansion of the I-27 corridor interstate system. So that's very, very important. We're also working on water planning. We're working with 3 other cities, with Abilene and San Angelo, in order to get water from Fort Stockton down not only to us, but to those 2 cities and other cities along that route that are also in the oil business. So that helps lift up other cities, helps them develop their industry, and it develops the region. So we've been very busy and very involved and played a leadership role in that aspect. We also have been working on expanding our air service. I mentioned the FBO, but also just more connections, and then also just additional airlines here in the Midland, Odessa area. What I'd like to end with is that to the members of the Hispanics in energy, and to every Hispanic professional and entrepreneurial and leader connected to this industry, I think the fact that you had this is very innovative in order to engage all Hispanics and all people that are on this call, and just the integration that we have been able to make in this country, and the fact that we're a huge component piece of the success of what's gone on in America. I think your work is essential. The presence is powerful. I mentioned all the different spaces that we take up in the energy industry, but we take other spaces and other parts of the support systems that support the energy industry. So your leadership is the future of energy. And I think mentoring, supporting local schools and training programs, like I mentioned before, like what we're doing, partnering with city and regional initiatives, like I mentioned with the transportation and water initiatives, and then championing innovation and continuous improvement, because not only do the oil field operations need to be as efficient as possible, but also those agencies around them need to be efficient, like the cities, like the permitting process, like being business friendly, and being able to point to some successes that help prop up the energy industry and are able to make them even more successful. So I think telling your story, because the story of this region is important. And I think every person telling their respective story that's been here today, I think it's been very enlightening. And I think America cannot lead the world in energy without the leadership of the Hispanic community and others that have played a large, huge part in this industry. The Permian Basin cannot lead without the people in this room. So the Permian Basin leads a lot of what's happening in America and across the world. And I'm very proud to be a part of it, and very proud to have been a part of this group and able to share a few comments from Midland with the group.
Well, Tommy, your information is very insightful, considering that 2/3 of national oil growth comes out of Midland. It's vital what you guys are doing, not just for, of course, Texas, but for North America and, of course, global supply. So thank you. It's good to see you in charge, understanding what's happening. And so I thank you for your presentation. And now we're going to move on to, we are going to move into our third session, which is powering up the Permian Basin. This session will explore recent and upcoming transmission and grid infrastructure development in both the ERCOT and SPP market, and what they mean for the future of energy reliability and growth in the region. Our moderator is Michael Lozano, who is the Director of Governmental Affairs and Communication at the Permian Basin Petroleum Association. And joining him today is Lori Cabos, who is President of Cabos Strategy, LLC, and a former Texas PUC commissioner. Adrian Rodriguez is the President of Xcel Energy of Texas and New Mexico. Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate that. Really happy to be here and join you here today and have this conversation with two very important individuals. I'm moderating this panel because I don't know nearly as much as these two panelists do with their experience and knowledge, both as regulating these markets as well as operating with them as a consumer, as a customer service operator with the generators of utilities and the importance of that. To step back a little bit, I think I'd just like to offer a little bit about the Permian Basin Petroleum Association. Our members are oil and gas operators that operate on both sides of the state line in both Texas and New Mexico of this very dynamic Permian Basin. I think Tommy said it best just a second ago. If you're talking about energy in this nation, you're talking about the Permian Basin, whether you know it or not. And there's nothing like recognizing the growth and strength of this region and in these communities, from Artesia to Midland and everything in between. These communities have continued to grow and are responsible for nearly half of all the crude production in the state and the nation, and almost half of all of the natural gas production and a growing amount of that as well. And so our hope for this conversation here is that for all of you that are able to attend and participate in this conversation is that you're able to gain a broad understanding of what oil and gas operators and general customers writ large are getting to learn about and operate within these two very unique markets in the Southwest Power Pool that covers New Mexico and the New Mexico portion of the Permian Basin, as well as the ERCOT region, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas portion that covers the Texas side. And with these two individuals, I hope we'll be able to have that conversation with some dynamism, as dynamic as the region itself. And so I certainly want to thank everyone for attending this morning, and certainly Commissioner Kobos and Adrian for participating. I guess we'll start off pretty quick and get going, and let's start off and set the stage. I think for those that maybe not be as familiar as the dynamism that exists within these markets. Commissioner Kobos, can you talk a little bit about what the ERCOT market looks like, how it's organized, who oversees this, and kind of how that functionality operates within the state of Texas?
Yes, so the ERCOT grid is basically it's an independent system operator. ERCOT is an independent system operator that manages the flow of electricity and power and supply. I'm sorry, there is a tremendous amount of noise in the background. I don't know if y'all can hear it.
You're good. Yeah, no.
Okay. ERCOT is an independent system operator that manages the daily supply and movement of power on the grid, and is also the central transmission planning coordinator that ensures that there is sufficient transmission to move power around the ERCOT region for meeting reliability and serving customers. And so the Public Utility Commission has regulatory oversight over ERCOT. And by way of this framework, you fast forward to 2023, the Texas legislature passed legislation that House Bill 5066 that required the commission to direct ERCOT to develop a reliability plan for the Permian Basin region. And I can get into the requirements of the plan. Essentially, what the plan was required to do by law was address extending transmission service to areas where mineral resources have been found, address increasing available capacity to meet forecasted load, and provide available infrastructure to reduce interconnection times in areas without access to transmission. So the law required ERCOT to develop this plan and to address those three areas. The commission directed ERCOT to develop the plan in December of 2023. ERCOT filed a plan for the commission's consideration in July, and the commission approved a plan and established a framework for implementing the plan in 2024. So that just sort of paints a backdrop of the interaction of what ERCOT is generally, the interaction of the Public Utility Commission and ERCOT, and also this law that is very important for the discussion today that resulted in the adoption and current implementation of the Permian Basin Reliability Plan. I was at the commission during this time and was charged with leading this effort on behalf of the commission. And so it is a very robust plan that ultimately results in over $25 billion worth of transmission infrastructure to serve the Permian Basin region. And I will leave it there and turn it over to Adrian and is more information on what's going on in ERCOT with the Permian Basin region and all this transmission infrastructure.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I'll tell you, I think you're also being a little bit humble. I want to let the folks out there know that there was no better champion for these issues, for those constituencies in the Permian Basin in ERCOT than Commissioner Cobos. So I want to be very sure that we're thankful to her for her leadership at the time and her continued leadership working on behalf of issues that are so important to these communities across Texas and New Mexico in the Permian. Adrian, you have a little different perspective, obviously. I think, when we talk about the needs of customers in the utility space, there's obviously an important dynamic to serve these customers. And I think Excel does a great job in communicating some of these needs. Can you kind of give us the perspective of what it's like to be that utility in for example, the Southwest Power Pool and juggling the fact that if you're an oil and gas customer, for example, you need power to drill, you need power to complete, you need power to transport, you need power to refine, you need power to produce, to either produce water. There's no shortage of energy needs in the sector alone, not to mention all of your other customers. So can you kind of give us that dynamic of a utility and SPP?
Absolutely. And first, thank you for having me. It's a good opportunity to see colleagues and friends from other parts of the industry. For example, I was listening to the list of cities that City Manager Gonzalez was listing. I know he and I had the chance of working with him when he was the city manager of El Paso, and I was at El Paso Electric Company at the time. The reason I bring that up is because the structure of our industry impacts your interactions with utilities. When I was at El Paso and City Manager Gonzalez was there as well, we were in a part of the state that is outside the ERCOT grid. It happened to be in the Western Interconnection. As much of New Mexico is also in the Western Interconnection. Now, where I am today, I'm in the Southwest Power Pool, providing electric service to 400,000 customers in the Panhandle of Texas, the South Plains of Texas, and into Eastern New Mexico, including Carlsbad, Hobbs, Artesia, and Roswell. City Manager Gonzalez is in Midland, and he meant among the towns that he mentioned, his are in ERCOT. Now, you might think, well, why is Adrian giving me a geography lesson here? It's because many of you all have this interaction where when you're trying to interact and get electric service, you're not just dealing with companies with different names or different policies. For example, my colleagues at Encore that serve the Midland Odessa region with poles and wires in that region, you may be just a few miles further north out in the Carlsbad and Hobbs region where we provide electric service. And the regulatory constructs that we have to operate under, given the regional transmission organizations or the independent system operator that Commissioner Cobos was discussing, impacts the way in which we're able to provide service and the speed at which we're able to provide service. The Southwest Power Pool happens to be the part of the Eastern Interconnection grid that is coordinated with transmission service from the southern part of New Mexico into Texas, all the way up to the Dakotas. ERCOT, of course, is all within ERCOT. All within Texas. So sometimes moving just a couple of counties over can impact the interaction that you're having and the policies that you're involved with as well. One thing to also think about is for those of you that are in the Permian Basin, you're either in the Midland Subbasin or the Delaware Basin. The location in New Mexico or location in Texas can also impact the way in which we're able to provide service, primarily because much of the electric service that we provide is determined by our state regulation. So we're either regulated by the Public Utility Commission of Texas when we provide electric service in Texas, or the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission when we provide service in New Mexico. Another bit of a difference is for those regions that are outside of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, such as Xcel Energy and the Southwest Power Pool, or my colleagues at El Paso Electric Company in the western part of the state, we're vertically integrated, meaning that we provide generation, transmission, distribution, and the customer engagement, which is different in ERCOT where there are independent power producers. So a bit of that lesson, that perspective plays a whole overlay of the interactions that I, as a utility, have with you all, our customers. And I'm certain much of the interaction and challenges that you feel when you have interactions with us.
That's a great point. I think, when we look at how operators engage with our utilities and our partners and regulators, we recognize that there are, in fact, unique distinctions and differences when you look at the different markets. Or, there's a line we like to say that while the geology does not change across the state lines, the policies do. And so that kind of sets us up to a conversation about kind of what are the regulatory and market challenges we're seeing. Commissioner Cobos, you mentioned House Bill 5066 and why that was an important step forward to allow us to look at ways to incentivize or encourage the much needed transmission in the Permian Basin and the ERCOT market. Can you talk about some of those challenges and what maybe need to be addressed in order to look at these fast growing areas of also very dynamic electric needs, right? It's not just oil and gas. It's not just the new influx of potential data centers. It's communities at large. These communities are growing. They need schools and hospitals and universities and research facilities that are also large drawers of power. What are some of the challenges and opportunities that you've seen?
Yeah, so to put it in perspective, the Permian Basin Reliability Plan that I discussed earlier was developed to serve 26,000 megawatts of power demand in the Permian Basin region by 2038. And so that is a mix of 50% oil and gas, and the other half is primarily non-oil and gas, like data centers and cryptos, right? So to serve this amount of power, you have to take into consideration how can we timely and reliably serve this consumer electricity demand by 2038, and really 2030, when most of it starts showing up, like 24,000 of the 26 will show up in 2030. So part of the challenge there is what kind of size of transmission voltage should be built to serve these customers. And so we engage in a very robust deliberation evaluation at the PUC to determine whether we should move forward with 345 kV transmission lines to serve the Permian, 5 of them, 5 lines, 5 345 kV transmission lines to serve the Permian, or 3 765 kV, which is the highest voltage superhighway transmission lines that you can build to serve the Permian. And so when we adopted the Permian Basin region, we left that question open. We adopted a base plan that would serve the Permian Basin region surrounding area, but we had to figure out what imports would be going in to move power from the rest of the state to the Permian Basin. And that is a discussion about how quickly you can build them, what's the cost, does it make more sense to build 3 instead of 5 from a landowner perspective? So there's a lot of policy, technical, property right type of issues that arise in that kind of discussion, and reliability too, right? And so that was a challenge in terms of trying to make sure that we set up the state and the commission and ERCOT and everybody involved to be able to take a deep dive into determining what those imports, the size of the import should be. The commission ultimately decided in April of 25 to have 3 765 kV imports into the Permian. Now, this whole plan is going to cost over $15 billion. And so one of the challenges is, affordability, right? So ultimately, consumers will have to pay for this transmission infrastructure, and also making sure that the existing cost allocation mechanisms that are overseen by the Public Utility Commission are evaluated to ensure that the small customers and small businesses aren't shouldering the majority of those costs. And so underneath that layer of this massive infrastructure, there are policy issues surrounding cost and affordability and landowner property right impacts. There has been a tremendous amount of landowner interest on these import paths, as the utilities that are building these import paths, which include Encore, LCRA, AEP Texas, and CPS Energy, their utilities within ERCOT, are getting ready to file CCNs and are holding public workshops and getting landowner input. So underneath this massive infrastructure development and build out are, again, property right issues, landowner impacts, cost allocation, making sure affordability is kept in mind. But at the same token, our state as a whole, Permian Basin and outside of the Permian Basin, there's a tremendous amount of electricity demand, and that's increasing, not only because of the oil and gas industry, but we have a lot of data center interest throughout the state. And also, the blessing of having a really strong economy with a very strong manufacturing, industrial, and technology base in the state. So as our economy continues to expand, our electricity demand is increasing and is projected to increase in ERCOT to nearly double from an 85 about an 85,000 megawatt peaking system to over 150,000 megawatt system in the next 5 years. So all of this electricity demand and customers have to be reliably served. And so there's 765 kV being evaluated for the eastern half to be able to move power around the state to serve customers. And how this is an opportunity is that we will continue to lead from an economic development standpoint in not only accommodating the Permian Basin and oil and gas industry and allowing them to electrify their operations and gain those efficiencies and expand further into the Delaware Basin, but also continue to draw many types of new businesses, including data centers to the state of Texas, and reliably serving them with these super highways and the infrastructure that will be built to serve them. And we can get that done faster in ERCOT, in Texas, than any other market or state across the country. But recognizing it still takes years for those lines to be built. So we there's a lot of opportunity there. There are challenges, but I think at the end of the day, the state and ERCOT will come out ahead by building the necessary infrastructure on the transmission side, but also incenting the necessary infrastructure on the power side and ensuring we have enough power generation so that we can continue to foster our strong economic development environment that we have in Texas and continue to lead and provide jobs and economic security for our state.
I think that's a great point. And I think you're right. These are hand in glove concepts, right? We have to have the generation online for then the transmission to move them like a general circuit does. And I'll let some of this more experience explain circuitry than I could. But but to allow that to happen and really allow for the free flow of electrons to move around within that circuit, within the grid, and provide hopefully what we recognize as much needed electricity. I think conservatively in some of our conversations with the Permian Basin Reliability Plan was that we recognize that because operators were effectively what's become commonly called islanding as a concept, was that operators are going out and creating on-site generation with the hope of eventually becoming interconnected onto the grid. And I think we conservatively on the Texas side of the Permian estimate about 4 gigs behind the meter of generated power that would love to be interconnected today. And so I think that kind of always runs the risk of catching up. And our goal is to have a utility structure in 2029. I think that's the earliest interconnection dates we're hearing about the reliability plan in service dates of those transmission lines of coming online in 2029 in order to really provide us the power that we probably needed a decade ago. And so I think that's always the challenge, right? Is to make sure you're having enough to account for the growth that you're seeing. And Adrian, I think that's probably something that's pretty difficult, but something that y'all want to be able to do as a utility, to be able to look forward and provide that electricity that the consumers need, your customers need all across the spectrum in both states. What are you seeing as far as challenges that can exist? And I'm sure there's some experiences and lessons learned you can share with us on that.
Absolutely. I think one of the issues that many folks that are listening here are dealing with in the industry in general has just been the challenges with supply chain. We all know coming out of COVID, there was a supply chain challenge that has changed to some extent, but it's because there's high demand now. You've got data centers, we've got large load customers such as the oil and gas industry and utilities all trying to build at the same time, which is creating a high demand of the limited supplies that are out there. So navigating supply chains is one issue. The second is if you think about the history of electric power and utility power in the country, we haven't had this degree of build in decades, especially at this speed. Yes, we've been building. Texas especially has been growing. Texas is a good model, but look at the amount of growth that now Texas sees today in relation to previous electric utility growth. So you can see the constructs that we have from statutes and regulations are also built for a time at which we needed a different speed. And maybe and we're looking at and exploring opportunities to be able to speed those timelines up. We're of course sensitive to the fact that we're not the only ones that are impacted. And obviously customers aren't the only ones that are impacted. Commissioner Cobos at the Public Utility Commission in Texas knows that the timelines and staff have high expectations on their own timelines to be able to prosecute cases and evaluate cases as quickly as they can with the limited budgets and resource and timelines that were set up for a different time frame. So part of the advocacy that we as an industry do that we look to our customers to also be mindful of is that we resource our public utility commissions in Texas and our New Mexico Public Regulation Commission, of which, for those that were on earlier, State Auditor Maestas was a member of that commission as well. Be able to have the resources necessary to evaluate our cases at the speed at which we need power. Also mindful, again, having to think about a regulatory construct and RTOs in a way that maybe customers haven't necessarily need to think about in the past. We're having an ERCOT SPP discussion. The Southwest Power Pool itself is also building a 765 kV outline across its footprint, of which the first segment will be built by Xcel Energy in Texas and New Mexico from Texas into the Delaware Basin over the next few years. That project has now been approved by the Southwest Power Pool, and 765 kV transmission lines are the way in which we're going to be providing some of that power. So an evaluation of those challenges, we're having to think about things differently for a speed in a time frame that we haven't historically had to contend with in decades. But with these types of conversations are important because we now think about how we're all trying to get to the same place, and we're only going to get there if we do this together.
Yeah, I think your points are really well taken, especially the one of the resource needs for both the PRC and the PUC when it comes to the staffing and availability of personnel to move these things through the process as efficiently as possible. I think we've, from an industrial perspective, a permit perspective, you want these to be thoroughly vetted, but you also want them to be thoroughly vetted as quickly as possible and to afford public participation in all those important vital operations, but to be done so efficiently so as to not further delay these timelines. Because I think, if you talk to most people that operate a business, 18 months is probably the end of a business cycle in terms of a budget and planning cycle versus I think in the utility space and the regulated space, we're talking 5 years as a timeline, as a quick timeline. And so that's kind of a unique thought. And I think I want to make sure everyone knows that those are hard cars to chase and harder cars to catch, probably, when you look at that kind of a lead time. But hopefully it does lend itself to some value on the chain when it comes to the needs of competing in that supply chain. There is some catch up period, hopefully, in that space. Commissioner, one of the things that we've talked about how important it has been in the ERCOT side, in the Texas side of things, is that it's so important to improve reliability and resilience, especially I think after Winter Storm Uri. You were at OPUC at that time, and then joined the PUC shortly thereafter, and had a front row view of really kind of what the challenges can be for a grid in circumstances. And I think we all are speaking towards the clear need to have robust resiliency and reliability in these markets. How can utilities, regulators, and RTOs continue to work together in order to improve that in the Permian, but also across the market?
Right. So a lot of that, there's just so much going on right now, as Adrian alluded to. We're in a historic high growth period in our state and really across other markets like the Southwest Power Pool and others throughout the country. And so the balance between reliability and affordability is really difficult to strike, because you want to make sure you're maintaining reliability in a very high growth electricity demand environment, and you want to make sure customers are still being able to afford their electricity bill. But and the balance is becoming even more important, right, at this time, and more complex. And so as we look to, transmission infrastructure build out, like for instance, the Permian Basin Reliability Plan in ERCOT, and the challenges of processing these CCN applications, the permit applications that the utilities will have to come in and apply for at the PUC, resources is going to be very important, as Adrian and you alluded to, as the PUC staff looks to process these cases within 180 days. That's a very fast timeline. The legislature changed that timeline, cut it in half in 2023. And ensuring that our PUC is well staffed and resourced to be able to process those applications, and at the same time take into consideration in other projects and dockets the overall underlying policy issues that we're facing here, the existing systems that have been in place for decades on rate recovery, cost recovery, infrastructure build out. All of that needs to be re-examined in a new world where customers look differently too. We've always had residential and small business and industrial and manufacturing, oil and gas. The data center world is much different. They can come online very quickly. And we want to make sure that the utilities that have an obligation by law to serve their customers are able to serve their customers reliably, um, and affordably, and in a resilient manner, because you don't want these larger resources to be without power. Sometimes, there could be cases where these large resources can trip offline and cause reliability issues. So you want to make sure that ERCOT, PUC, the stakeholders involved want to make sure to work together to ensure that there's a reliable service that these customers can obtain. So I think continued engagement by the industry stakeholders with the commission, with ERCOT, and in Adrian's case with the SPP. I also served on the regional state committee in the Southwest Power Pool. I was part of the approval of the 2024 integrated transmission plan that included the line that Adrian referred to as the first 765 kV line in SPP. But it's the same policy considerations that the Southwest Power Pool, being the staff, the leadership of the Southwest Power Pool, the regional state committee, which is comprised of the state regulators from each state that sits within the Southwest Power Pool footprint, and the board of directors. They're thinking about reliability. They're thinking about costs. They're thinking about timely completion of those lines in a way that can obviously provide reliable service, but taking into consideration the challenges Adrian talked about, supply chain and other challenges, landowner impacts, as some of these 765 kV proposed 765 kV transmission lines in the Southwest Power Pool will span across states that will impact landowners as well. So it's all the same sort of policy, regulatory issues with different players, different regulators in some cases, but ultimately the same issues. And I think we as a whole need to work together to make sure we are prepared for the future to be able to reliably serve a customer base that looks much different and will continue to look much different than what we have historically had in Texas and other states and markets.
That's a really good point, and I think really kind of necessitated that conversation. We tried to have we didn't know what we didn't know as consumers. We were price takers. I think when you look at an industry focusing pretty explicitly on paying electricity bills and never trying to attempt to create behind the meter utilities, right? That was never a goal of our membership. And I remember you asked, I think one of our members in Midland in 2023, and asked, well, would you have done that knowing all the things you know now? And I think the generous answer was hell no, but it was because there wasn't another option, right? That sometimes we are limited by the regulatory functions that exist, which necessitate things like House Bill 5066 and conversations about how to expedite these processes. But also, when we talk about how complex this market is, and both of these are the electricity generation transmission systems that exist across this nation, it certainly makes the depths of 10,000-foot laterals look a little less complex because of just the timing of how important these frequencies have to be. And I think when we talk about that, what role does innovation and emerging technologies, whether that's advanced grid monitoring, storage, or other automations that exist, Adrian, that you're seeing as a utility that can be helpful in either helping maximize the amount of electrons on the grid or other things like that?
Well, for example, I think let's start first for those of you who take service on the distribution voltage level. You see a lot of grid hardening that is making the system much more resilient to extreme weather events and wildfire than we've historically had in the past. In fact, Texas is one of the leaders in terms of storm hardening by having system resiliency plans that we primarily use on our distribution systems in order to harden them against those extreme weather events, recognizing that different parts of Texas have different extreme weathers. I mean, I won't make my poles and wires hurricane resistant. That's for my colleagues on the coast. That will focus more on maybe drier weather and plains type straight line winds in my part of the state. And Texas gives us that opportunity. So you'll see grid hardening and technology that allows more segmentation of the lines so that there's more granular visibility on the distribution system. And that's for those of you that take power at the distribution level. For those of you that are at the transmission voltage level, you obviously see the technology that you have in innovation is the fact that we are moving to 765 kV transmission lines in Texas and across other grids, including the Southwest Power Pool, as we've just discussed. So that's another one that you're going to see on the transmission side, not to mention all the other monitoring that we have that has historically been part of the transmission system that'll now start moving to the distribution system. On the generation side, you're seeing much more use of batteries in a way that we had not historically thought of them before as generating resources. I know the concern and the thought is that they take power off of the grid, but frankly, they are given a lot of capacity accreditation at this point in time for those that live in the resource planning world because of the value that they provide, especially when other resources are not available, especially if they can also charge off of intermittent renewable resources. So those are all technologies that we are now utilizing in a way that we have not historically thought of using them in the past. I know we might have previously thought of battery, and maybe in ERCOT there's more focus on the fact that maybe it's helping with the transmission system and voltage support. But in other parts of the country, especially where you're looking at resource planning, batteries are moving into the stage of being a generating resource, being given that accredited capacity as such. But the technology spans all segments of our business: transmission, distribution, and generation.
And I think that's fascinating. And I think I could probably pick y'all's brains for another couple of hours. I think y'all both have such a wealth of knowledge in the spaces that y'all have worked for so many years and done such great work. I do have to kick it over to Q&A, but I want to thank everyone for attending. Hopefully there are some good questions that are going to be asked so we can keep that conversation going for a little bit longer. But certainly want to thank the sponsors and obviously our event host, Hispanics in Energy, for this great opportunity. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Michael. You did an amazing job at moderating this panel, and a very interesting panel because we seem to be at a crossroads where we understand there's a lot of people moving to Texas. We need a lot more energy. How are we going to do all this? We've learned some lessons in past storms, Storm Uri, and I think everybody's working together. I think I'd like to ask one question of the panelists. What did we learn from system failures from the past that you feel that we learned the most? Where will we gain the most from some of the past storms that we saw? Maybe we weren't quite so prepared. What do you feel that Texans can feel secure that we pretty much have gotten over some hurdles from lessons learned? Very interested to see how we learned from the past and how we changed the laws or different things to protect us a little bit more.
Well, I could probably take the first stab at that. So I was appointed to the PUC by Governor Abbott after Winter Storm Uri. And that was essentially to go roll up our sleeves and basically fix everything that happened from Uri. And Uri was a devastating storm with billions of dollars of impacts, of financial loss to the state, and hundreds of lives that were lost. Besides Uri, we've had other instances where cold weather has been an impact before. In 2011, we had rotating outages in ERCOT. The federal government provided recommendations that not all of them were implemented when Uri struck the state. And so as we were dealing with the impacts of Uri, it was during the legislative session of 2021. And there was a suite of bipartisan reforms that were passed and signed into law by the governor. And so some of the main issues from Uri was that our power plants were not weatherized and parts of the gas system were not weatherized. There was laws that were passed to require and mandate the weatherization of the power generation fleet and the transmission system on the electricity side of the equation. And so what I mean by mandate is there was associated administrative penalties if you were not weatherized appropriately. So not only was it required, but there was a hammer behind it. And so we implemented the law in ultimately the weatherization is, the power generation fleet and T&D system has been weatherized. It is a very strong weatherization program. ERCOT inspects the power plants and transmission system before the winter and now the summer. As there's a part of a program that's ongoing. It's not just the one check only system, but that has provided tremendous reliability benefits to maintain reliability during extreme cold weather events. The other one issue that we experienced was gas availability. So for a variety of reasons, parts of the gas system were frozen, or natural gas plants that were needed to supply gas to electricity plants were rotated out by the utilities that were asked to rotate power out by ERCOT. So how we addressed that issue was creating a firm fuel product where power generators in ERCOT that are able to meet certain requirements that we put in place can switch to on-site dual fuel, on-site alternative fuel to use that alternative fuel if they have gas supply issues. And that product has provided tremendous amount of benefits to ensure that if gas isn't available, then the power plant is just not able to provide power at all. Now they can switch over to alternative on-site fuel to sustain their operations, and also to prevent the rotating out of natural gas plants that are needed for electricity plants. There's a registration process for critical loads for natural gas plants that are critical for electric power generation, have to register as critical loads so the utilities don't rotate them out when they're asked to rotate customers out during a load shed event in ERCOT. And also these natural gas plants can't participate in a program in ERCOT that's called the Emergency Response Service, where they get paid to rotate out. And that unfortunately happened during Winter Storm Uri, where we had natural gas plants that were part of that paid demand response program, and they got rotated out, and we needed them for the power plant operations to produce electricity. Another factor was communication. Now there's more central communication among all state leaders, key state leadership, PUC, Railroad Commission, TDM, DP, just all the agencies that are involved during an event. And so the creation of the Texas Electricity Reliability Council, TERC, serves as a central forum for coordinating that communication during the event. During Uri, there was a lot of ad hoc, haphazard communication that didn't help. And so that's another critical piece. And then also the critical map that was required to be developed that shows all of the critical natural gas facilities and water facilities that are necessary to provide critical electric service.
And that's also applicable to many of the gas supply outside the ERCOT region, which supplies us in the Southwest Power Pool and my colleagues in the other 3 Texas utilities that are outside of ERCOT. With regard to weather events, the 2011 winter storm that Commissioner Cobos referenced was one that impacted the non-ERCOT utilities in the state. So given that we oversee much of our own generation facilities, many of them were winterized after the 2011 snow and extreme cold event that happened in Texas. And so while Uri didn't necessarily impact us to the same degree that it impacted other generating plants in the ERCOT region, because we had gone through weatherization efforts after 2011, the gas supply efforts that have occurred in ERCOT are also beneficial for us in the non-ERCOT regions of the state of Texas.
Well, thank you. This panel was very insightful and a very important but complicated topic. Thank you for breaking it down for us to understand a little bit more. Michael, you did a great job. Thank you to your panelists as well. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure so did all of the attendees.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And now moving on, we've come to the part where we're going to welcome our keynote address. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Henry Cuellar, U.S. Representative of Texas 28th District, a longtime champion of energy development and economic growth. Congressman Cuellar has sent us a video today for us to review. Can we play the video?
Hello, this is Congressman Henry Cuellar. I want to thank Hispanics in Energy for hosting this energy webinar and everyone taking part in this conversation today. I appreciate the chance to speak to you because the Permian Basin and South Texas help power America. We keep our economy moving, keep our lights on, and keep our country secure. The rest of the country may talk about America's energy future, but the folks here at the Permian build it every day, producing more than 40% of the oil that keeps America running. And when we talk about the growth ahead, we all know what that really means. It means new investment, innovation, and jobs on the ground. It means families and communities that continue to benefit from this industry for decades to come. The success of the Permian doesn't just show up on paper, it shows up in schools, small businesses, and hometowns across Texas. And I believe it is important for every American to understand just how vital this region is to our national strength. The Permian is one of the great strategic assets of the United States. We need continued support, continued investment, and continued recognition of the men and women who make this possible. America cannot succeed in energy without the Permian Basin. That is what makes today's discussion so important. You're bringing together the people who understand that the energy policy is about more than production. It's about communities, workforce training, infrastructure, and reliability. It's about making sure that Hispanic workers and Hispanic entrepreneurs have every opportunity to succeed in the industry they help build. In Congress, I support policies that keep American production strong and keep energy costs down. In 2015, I was the lead Democrat who worked across the aisle to lift the ban on oil exports. That wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. That decision created tens of thousands of jobs, stabilized energy prices, and sent a powerful signal to the world that America is not just an energy consumer, we are also an energy leader. And energy is not just about barrels or kilowatts, it's whether a grandmother in Laredo can cool her home in August without losing her grocery monies. It's whether a student in San Antonio can charge a laptop and chase the dream of being the first in their family to graduate from college. It's whether welders, pipe fitters, and truck drivers in South Texas can count on steady work that provides dignity and opportunity. That is why we strengthen oil and gas while embracing innovation. We do not have to choose between traditional energy and new technology. We can lead in both. That is how we protect American jobs, stay competitive, and make sure that America never has to depend on foreign governments for our energy. And I believe this reflects our shared commitment to the communities that we serve. Community development is energy policy. Energy production depends on strong schools, housing, healthcare, and local leadership. When we invest in people, we invest in our energy future. So, as we wrap up this event, I want to thank you for your partnership and your leadership. Thank you for the work that you do every day to move our country forward and keep our future bright. The Permian Basin is not just powering today, it is shaping America's tomorrow. God bless you, God bless Texas, and God bless the United States of America.
What a nice message from Congressman Cuellar, and we do thank you for your participation as well as your commitment to Texas and the energy sector. In closing today's program, I am pleased to welcome back Alaman Valverde, mineral legal rights expert attorney and board member of Hispanics in Energy, along with Jose, president of Hispanics in Energy, Jose Perez as well. Jose and Alaman?
Yeah, I'll let Aleman say a few words.
Thank you, Kim. Fantastic job in being today's moderator and MC. Thank you very much. And I definitely want to thank, everybody that's been participating, everybody who attended. Thank you for your time and for your attention, on these really, really, important issues that, we've been discussing today. I definitely want to take the chance to, thank our sponsors that made today possible. ExxonMobil, Chevron, and the American fuel and petrochemical manufacturers. Thank you for today's sponsorship. I hope we can come back, maybe year after year, and do this again, and do this on a long-term basis. And definitely, your sponsorship will make that possible. We also had other supporting organizations, and I definitely want to take the time to recognize them. Thank you to the Energy Network Media Group, to BioFriendly, ARG Petro, the Texas Independent Producers and Royalty Owners, and to the Midland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We definitely appreciate everything you provided today to make today possible. Well, Jose, we're going to have a big announcement. Maybe I'll let you do it.
All right, great. Well, we as part of our work is to educate our community around the country, and we've been doing this for 13 years now. And we're very happy to announce that we're going to be doing our first inaugural annual conference in Houston, Texas in September 22nd and 23rd. It'll be at the Houston Convention Center. We're very excited. We intend to pull together policymakers who are leaders, industry leaders, and obviously community leaders. A lot of our partners like Haku, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, NALEO, and there's several others that we anticipate joining us. We want to invite you early. For more information, just tune in onto our website. But we're very delighted to do this. And just to give you a little bit of background on how we got into Texas, last year I was invited to speak at the Hispanic Heritage Month event for ExxonMobil's Hispanic Employee Resource Group called GOAL, GOAL, and at their campus in the Woodlands, and it was in that conversation that this idea to focus on the Permian Basin came up, and so. We're very delighted to have been able to bring this information to our community around the country. And it's a very important project. We are all the above energy. So beyond doing oil and gas, we also focus on utilities. We work on solar power, nuclear power, geothermal. We're doing some interesting events in California on January 14th, the California Energy Summit. And of course, we also do our annual legislative event in February in Washington, D.C. But this one is going to be the kickoff of a very major opportunity to network, not only with the stakeholders, but some of the leaders that you met today, and many more of them. So thank you very much. This was a very powerful webinar today. Kim, thank you very much for emceeing this for us. And Oman, thank you so much for always helping out. He's a Top Gun attorney in mineral law. And so, if there's anything that we can be of service to any of our stakeholders out there, let us know, whether it's a business connection like with our friend Jose Nino or others. We got a lot of talented people in our organization. So thank you very much, everybody.
And finally, just say, I hope everybody has great holidays, a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I hope you enjoy your time with your families.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, it keeps muting me. I just wanted to say thank you. You all put on an outstanding seminar, and I'm very glad to be a part of it. You guys work hard and the mission. And so I think this was a very successful conference. I learned a lot. And so thank you for putting it on, and thank you for having me MC your event. Excuse me. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.